The crystal chandelier swayed slightly as Evelyn Cross stumbled against the marble table, her champagne flute shattering across polished floors. Around her, the grand ballroom stood empty, chairs overturned, centerpieces wilting, silence pressing down like judgment. The most powerful woman in corporate America sat alone among the wreckage of her own celebration, mascara stained and trembling, while somewhere beyond those gilded doors, a quiet janitor named Daniel Moore pushed his cleaning cart toward a moment that would destroy every certainty either of them had ever known. If you're watching this, stay until the very end, because what happens next will challenge everything you think you know about power, family, and second chances. Drop a like right now and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. Trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. Daniel Moore had learned long ago that invisible people see everything. He moved through the Meridian Tower's executive floors each night like a ghost, emptying trash bins, wiping down conference tables, restocking supplies, while the people who ran billion-dollar empires never once looked his way. 5 years he'd worked this shift, 5 years of polishing the fingerprints of power off glass doors and mahogany desks, 5 years of being nobody. Tonight felt different. The annual Cross Industries Gala had ended hours ago, but the ballroom on the 42nd floor still glowed with abandoned opulence. Daniel pushed his cart through the service entrance, taking in the scene with practiced efficiency. Shattered champagne flutes near the bar, lipstick-stained napkins crumpled on tables, a woman's evening shoe lying sideways beneath a chair, its partner nowhere in sight. Then he saw her. Evelyn Cross sat alone at the head table, her designer gown pooling around her like spilled ink, one arm draped across the white tablecloth, the other clutching an empty bottle of something expensive. Her dark hair had escaped its careful updo, falling in waves across her shoulders. Even disheveled and clearly drunk, she radiated the kind of beauty that came with wealth and power. Sharp cheekbones, flawless skin, the posture of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Daniel had seen her before, of course. Everyone in the building knew Evelyn Cross. She was the billionaire CEO who'd built her father's struggling tech company into a global empire through sheer ruthlessness. The woman who'd fired 300 employees in a single morning without blinking. The ice queen who never smiled, never apologized, never showed weakness. Except right now, she looked shattered. Daniel hesitated. Company policy was clear. Service staff maintained boundaries with executives. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't make eye contact. Don't exist in their world any more than absolutely necessary. But she was crying. Silent tears tracked mascara down her face as she stared at nothing, her jaw tight, her fingers white-knuckled around the bottle's neck. Something about the raw vulnerability in her expression made Daniel's chest ache with recognition. He'd worn that same look 5 years ago, sitting in a hospital corridor while his wife died and their newborn daughter fought for survival in the NICU. That was the face of someone who'd just realized they were completely, utterly alone. Daniel cleared his throat softly. "Ms. Cross? Are you all right?" Her head snapped up, eyes focusing on him with obvious difficulty. For a long moment, she just stared, as if trying to remember how to process the existence of another human being. "Who the hell are you?" Her voice came out rough, slurred at the edges. "Daniel Moore, ma'am. I'm with the night cleaning crew. I can come back later if you need." "No." She waved a hand dismissively, nearly knocking over a candlestick. "Stay. Go. I don't care. Do whatever invisible people do." The word should have stung, but Daniel heard the brittleness beneath them. He'd spent 5 years being invisible. He knew desperation when he heard it. He started with the tables farthest from her, working methodically, giving her space while staying close enough to intervene if she fell. She didn't acknowledge him again, just sat there clutching that empty bottle like it was the only solid thing in her universe. 20 minutes passed in silence, broken only by the clink of glass against plastic as Daniel cleared debris. Then, without warning, Evelyn spoke. "Do you know what today was?" Daniel paused, a handful of crumpled napkins frozen halfway to his trash bag. "The annual gala, ma'am." "My 40th birthday." She laughed, a hollow sound that echoed in the empty ballroom. 40 years old, $1 billion in assets, companies on 3 continents. And I sat at that table tonight surrounded by 500 people who had slit each other's throats for my approval, and I have never felt more completely fucking alone in my entire life. Daniel said nothing. Sometimes silence was the only honest response. You know what they toasted? Evelyn continued, her words tumbling out now like she couldn't stop them. My vision, my leadership, my uncompromising standards. They raised their glasses to the woman who never lets anything stand in her way, the woman who chose empire over everything else. She tilted the empty bottle, watching nothing pour from its mouth. They have no idea what I've sacrificed, what I've destroyed, what I'll never get back. Daniel resumed cleaning, but slower now, listening. I had a fiancé once, Evelyn said. 10 years ago, Marcus. He was brilliant, kind. He looked at me like I was more than a balance sheet. Her fingers traced the bottle's label. He asked me to take 6 months off. 6 months to plan a wedding, start a family, be human for a little while. I told him I couldn't. The company needed me. A merger was pending. The board was fractious. She closed her eyes. He left. Married someone else 2 years later. They have 3 children now. I see them sometimes on social media. They look happy. The word came out like an accusation against the universe. Daniel finished one table and moved to the next, closer now. He could see her face clearly, the tear tracks, the smudged makeup, the expression of someone who just calculated the true cost of their choices. Every man I've dated since then has wanted one of 2 things, Evelyn continued. My money or my connections. They see the empire, not the woman. And I let them because at least transactions are honest. At least business deals don't pretend to be something they're not. She set the bottle down with exaggerated care. But tonight, sitting at that table while everyone celebrated everything I've built, all I could think was, what happens when I'm gone? Who inherits any of this? Who carries forward anything that matters? She looked up at Daniel then, really looked at him, her eyes sharp despite the alcohol. Do you have children? The question caught him off guard. A daughter, Emma. She's 5. Something shifted in Evelyn's expression. A flash of raw hunger quickly masked. What's that like? Daniel thought about how to answer honestly. Terrifying. Exhausting. The best thing that ever happened to me. Your wife must be proud. My wife passed away. The words still hurt, even after 5 years. During childbirth. It was complicated. They had to choose. He met Evelyn's gaze steadily. Emma survived. My wife didn't. Evelyn's breath caught. For a moment, the CEO vanished entirely, replaced by something more human. I'm sorry. Me too. Daniel moved to the next table. But Emma's worth everything. Even the grief. Even the struggle. She's the reason I get up every morning. And you raise her alone? My mother helps when she can, but yeah, mostly alone. He allowed himself a small smile. It's not the life I planned, but it's the one I have. And she makes it mean something. Evelyn stared at him with an intensity that made Daniel uncomfortable. He couldn't read the expression on her face, calculation, longing, desperation, all tangled together into something almost frightening. I want that, she whispered. Before it's too late. Before my body makes the choice for me. I want to know what it's like to matter to someone who didn't choose me for my portfolio. Daniel didn't know what to say to that. The confession felt too intimate, too raw for a conversation between a billionaire CEO and a night janitor who'd never exchanged more than polite nods before tonight. Evelyn stood abruptly, swaying slightly. Daniel moved instinctively to steady her, his hand catching her elbow. She looked down at his calloused fingers against the silk of her gown with an expression he couldn't interpret. You're kind, she said quietly. Actually kind. Not strategic kindness. Not networking kindness. Just human decency. She laughed again, that same hollow sound. I'd forgotten what that looked like. Ms. Cross, maybe you should... I'm 40 years old. Her grip on his arm tightened. 40 years old, and my reproductive endocrinologist says my fertility window is closing fast. Maybe another year, maybe 2 if I'm lucky. After that, it's over. No amount of money can buy back time. Daniel felt his pulse quicken with alarm. Where was this going? I've considered surrogates, Evelyn continued, her words rushing together now. Adoption. Every clinical option that money can arrange. But those all feel like transactions, like I'm acquiring an asset instead of creating a family. I want... She broke off, her eyes welling up again. I want to know what it feels like to carry life, to be responsible for another human being from their first breath, to love someone without conditions or contracts or exit clauses. That's not something you can plan, Daniel said carefully. It just happens. Does it? Evelyn's gaze locked on his, and something in her expression made his breath catch. Or do we make it happen, right now, tonight, before I sober up and remember all the reasons this is insane, before I retreat back into the fortress I've built and die alone with my empire and my regrets? Daniel's mind went blank with shock. Ms. Cross, Evelyn. Her fingers moved from his arm to his chest, feeling his heartbeat through the thin fabric of his work shirt. My name is Evelyn, and I'm asking you, not as your employer, not as some corporate tyrant, but as one broken human being to another, help me do one honest thing before time runs out. You're drunk, Daniel managed, his voice unsteady. You're grieving something. Tomorrow I'll put the armor back on and pretend I don't need anything from anyone. Evelyn's hand moved to his face, her touch gentle despite the desperation in her eyes. But tonight, I'm just a woman who wants to be seen, who wants to create something real, who wants to know what it feels like to be chosen by someone who has nothing to gain from choosing me. Daniel should have stepped back, should have called security, should have maintained every professional boundary that separated their worlds. But he looked into Evelyn Cross's eyes and saw the same desperate loneliness he'd felt every night for the past 5 years. Saw a woman who'd sacrificed her humanity for power and was finally understanding the cost. Saw someone so completely, utterly isolated that she was offering herself to a stranger in an empty ballroom just to feel something real. And beneath all his rational objections, beneath every sensible reason to walk away, Daniel recognized something else. A woman who wanted what he had with Emma. Purpose. Connection. Love without conditions. If we do this, he heard himself say, his voice barely above a whisper, and if it leads to a child, I won't abandon them. I don't care who you are or what you can afford. Children aren't commodities, they're people. They deserve stability, love, 2 parents who give a damn. Evelyn's eyes widened, surprise cutting through the alcohol haze. You would stay involved? I raised Emma alone because I had to. Daniel's jaw tightened. But I've seen what it costs her not to have a mother. If we create a life together, I won't walk away from it, ever, no matter how complicated things get. Something in Evelyn's expression cracked open. Relief, hope, fear all tangled together. You don't even know me. No, Daniel admitted, but I know what it looks like when someone's drowning. And I know what it means to want something real in a world that's mostly performance. Evelyn closed the distance between them, her lips finding his with a tenderness that surprised them both. The kiss tasted like expensive champagne and desperation, like 2 people reaching for connection in the wreckage of their separate loneliness. What happened next happened in silence. No negotiation, no transaction, just 2 broken people choosing vulnerability in a moment neither fully understood. Evelyn led him to one of the private suites adjacent to the ballroom, spaces kept for VIP guests during corporate events. The room was elegant and impersonal, all neutral colors and expensive furniture that had never been truly lived in. Daniel had never been with anyone since his wife died. The grief had been too raw, the responsibility of raising Emma too consuming. But here, with this stranger who saw him as more than just part of the scenery, something in him unlocked. Not love. They didn't know each other well enough for that. But recognition, understanding, 2 people who'd been invisible for different reasons finally being seen. Evelyn moved with a vulnerability that contrasted sharply with her public persona, reaching for connection with trembling hands and uncertain kisses. Daniel responded with gentleness, treating her with a care he suspected few people in her life had ever offered. They came together like survivors of separate shipwrecks finding unexpected shore, grateful, desperate, afraid the moment would dissolve if they thought about it too hard. Afterward, they lay in the darkness without speaking, the weight of what they'd done settling over them like snow. Evelyn's breathing gradually steadied, her head against Daniel's shoulder, her fingers tracing absent patterns across his chest. "I don't do this," she whispered finally. "I don't lose control. I don't make impulsive decisions. I certainly don't sleep with employees." "I'm not really your employee," Daniel pointed out quietly. "I work for the cleaning contractor, technically different company." Evelyn laughed, a real laugh this time, surprised and genuine. "Is that your loophole?" "It's something." Daniel stared at the ceiling. "For what it's worth, I don't do this either. Haven't been with anyone since my wife. Didn't think I would be again for a long time." "Why tonight?" Daniel considered the question carefully. "Because you weren't trying to use me. You were just honest about being lonely, about wanting something real. I've been lonely too. And I guess I recognized it." Evelyn shifted against him, her voice dropping even lower. "If this results in a pregnancy, and statistically, at my age, it probably won't, what happens then?" "Really?" "Then we figure it out." Daniel's hand found hers in the darkness. "I meant what I said. I don't abandon children. Ever. We'd co-parent, work out custody, do whatever it takes to give them stability. You do that with someone you barely know? Someone who lives in a completely different world? I do that for the child." Daniel squeezed her fingers gently. "They didn't ask to be created. They deserve better than two parents who walked away from responsibility because it was complicated." Evelyn was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled. "I've spent 40 years building walls, protecting myself, making sure no one could hurt me by keeping everyone at a distance. And you're talking about co-parenting a hypothetical child with a stranger like it's the most natural thing in the world." "Children make everything both simpler and more complicated," Daniel said. "They cut through all the bullshit we use to protect ourselves. They just need love, consistency, parents who show up." He turned to look at her in the dim light filtering through the windows. "If we created a life tonight, that life would need us both. Everything else we'd figure out as we go." Evelyn's eyes glistened. "You're either incredibly naive or the most decent person I've ever met." "Maybe both." Daniel managed a tired smile. "But I've learned you can't plan for everything. Sometimes you just have to trust that doing the right thing will work out somehow." "The right thing?" Evelyn repeated the phrase like she was testing its weight. "I'm not sure I remember what that means anymore. In my world, everything's calculated. Risk assessment, ROI analysis, strategic positioning." Her fingers tightened around his. "This is the first uncalculated thing I've done in 20 years. How does it feel?" "Terrifying." She laughed shakily. "Also, alive. Actually alive instead of just existing." They lay together in silence until the first gray light of dawn began filtering through the windows. Reality pressed against the fragile bubble they'd created, bringing with it all the complications they'd temporarily ignored. Evelyn sat up slowly, reaching for her discarded gown. Her movements were careful, controlled, the CEO reassembling herself piece by piece. Daniel watched the transformation with something like sadness, seeing vulnerability replaced by practiced composure. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. Evelyn's hand stilled on the zipper of her dress. "Now I go back to my penthouse. You finish your shift. We both pretend this never happened. And if you're pregnant?" She turned to face him, and Daniel saw the walls already rebuilding behind her eyes. "Then I'll contact you. We'll discuss options, make arrangements." Her voice had shifted back into that crisp professional tone, the voice of someone negotiating a business deal. "I'll ensure you're compensated appropriately for your time and discretion." "I don't want money." Daniel sat up, pulling on his work shirt. "If there's a child, I want to be their father. That's not something you can compensate me for." "Everything can be compensated," Evelyn said, but her voice lacked conviction. "That's how the world works." "Maybe in your world." Daniel met her gaze steadily. "In mine, some things matter more than money, family, integrity. Doing right by the people who depend on you. Evelyn's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the woman who'd been desperate and alone just hours before. I don't know how to do this. Any of this. I don't know how to be vulnerable or trust people or navigate relationships that aren't transactional. Then we learn together. Daniel stood, closing the distance between them. If there's a child, if you're willing to try. And if I'm not? The question came out as a challenge, but Daniel heard the fear underneath. Then I'll respect that decision. Daniel's voice softened. But I hope you won't make it out of fear. You wanted something real, something honest. That means accepting help, sharing responsibility, letting someone else matter. Evelyn stared at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, with careful deliberation, she reached into her evening bag and pulled out a business card. Not her corporate one, but something simpler, personal cell number written in her own handwriting. 3 weeks, she said, pressing the card into his palm. If my cycle doesn't start in 3 weeks, I'll call you. We'll figure out next steps. Until then, she straightened her shoulders. Until then, we maintain professional boundaries. You continue your work, I continue mine. We don't discuss this with anyone. Agreed. Daniel pocketed the card carefully. But, Evelyn? She paused at the door, not turning around. Thank you. For being honest tonight. For taking a chance on something real, even if it scared you. Her shoulders tensed. For a heartbeat, Daniel thought she might respond, might let the vulnerability back in, but when she spoke, her voice was controlled, distant. Finish your shift, Mr. Moore, and forget this happened. The door closed behind her with a soft click that felt louder than a gunshot. Daniel stood alone in the elegant suite, surrounded by evidence of a night that would change everything or mean nothing at all. His hands were shaking. His mind raced with 1,000 implications he hadn't had time to consider in the heat of the moment. He'd just slept with one of the most powerful women in corporate America, possibly created a child with her, promised to co-parent a life that might not even exist yet. It was insane, reckless, completely outside every careful boundary he'd built to protect himself and Emma from further pain. But as Daniel straightened the room and returned to his cleaning cart in the abandoned ballroom, something in his chest felt lighter than it had in 5 years. For one night, he hadn't been invisible. He'd mattered to someone, connected with another human being beyond the roles they played in their separate worlds. If nothing came of it, at least he'd have that. But as Daniel pushed his cart toward the service elevator, Evelyn's business card heavy in his pocket, he had a feeling that nothing about his life was going to be simple anymore. 3 weeks. That's all the time they had before reality would demand an answer. 3 weeks to prepare for the possibility that 2 broken people had created something neither of them had planned for. 3 weeks before everything changed. Daniel finished his shift in silence, his mind spinning with possibilities and fears. When he finally punched out at dawn and walked to the parking garage where his beat-up sedan waited, he pulled out his phone and looked at the single photo on his lock screen. Emma, grinning at the camera with her 2 front teeth missing, her eyes bright with uncomplicated joy. "What did your dad just do?" he whispered to the image. Emma's frozen smile offered no answers. Daniel drove home through the empty pre-dawn streets, past the gleaming towers where people like Evelyn Cross built their empires, past the modest neighborhoods where people like him survived day by day. 2 worlds, completely separate, never meant to intersect, except now they had. And somewhere in the expensive silence of her penthouse across the city, Evelyn Cross stood at her floor-to-ceiling windows watching the sunrise, her hand pressed unconsciously against her flat stomach, wondering if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her carefully controlled life, or if, for the first time in 40 years, she'd finally done something right. 3 weeks would tell. The pregnancy test sat on the marble bathroom counter like an accusation. Evelyn stared at the 2 pink lines, her hands gripping the edge of the sink so tightly her knuckles had gone white. 3 tests, 3 identical results, 3 confirmations that the night she'd tried so hard to forget had consequences neither money nor power could erase. She was pregnant. 40 years old, billionaire CEO of a global empire, and pregnant by a janitor whose last name she'd barely remembered until she'd pulled his employee file from HR 3 days ago when her period was late. Daniel Moore, 32 years old, Widower, single father. High school graduate who'd never finished the engineering degree he'd started before his wife got sick. The file had been depressingly thin. No career trajectory, no ambitions beyond keeping his daughter fed and sheltered. A ghost moving through the building's night shift, collecting minimum wage and asking nothing from anyone. Except he'd asked something from her that night. He'd asked her to be honest, to be human, to remember that some things mattered more than quarterly earnings and shareholder value. And she'd been desperate enough, lonely enough, to say yes. Evelyn's reflection stared back at her from the mirror, her face pale beneath expensive makeup, her eyes shadowed with sleepless nights. She'd spent 3 weeks trying to convince herself it had been a mistake, a moment of weakness, something to compartmentalize and move past like every other emotional impulse she'd learned to suppress over 4 decades of calculated ambition. But her body had other plans. She picked up her phone with trembling fingers, Daniel's number already pulled up from the business card she'd given him. Her thumb hovered over the call button for a full minute before she forced herself to press it. He answered on the second ring. "Hello?" His voice was different than she remembered, warmer, more awake. Background noise filtered through the connection, children's laughter and morning television. "Mr. Moore, this is Evelyn Cross." Her professional voice clicked into place automatically, cool and controlled. "We need to talk. Can you meet me today?" A pause. She heard him moving, the background noise fading as he presumably stepped into another room. "Is this about—" "Yes." She cut him off before he could finish. 2 o'clock. There's a coffee shop 3 blocks from Meridian Tower, Cafe Luminance. I've reserved the private room in the back. I work second shift. I can be there. Good. Come alone. This conversation stays between us for now. Understood. Another pause. Are you all right? The question surprised her. Not, are you pregnant, or what do you want from me? Just genuine concern for her well-being. Evelyn's throat tightened unexpectedly. I'll see you at 2, Mr. Moore. She ended the call before he could respond, before the careful control in her voice could crack. 6 hours. She had 6 hours to decide what she wanted, what she'd accept, how to navigate a situation that had no corporate handbook or strategic framework. 6 hours to prepare for a conversation that would determine the rest of her life. Evelyn Cross had built an empire by controlling variables, eliminating risks, and maintaining absolute authority over every aspect of her world. But the life growing inside her was a variable she couldn't control, and Daniel Moore was a risk she'd already taken. The private room at Cafe Luminance was elegant and discreet, tucked behind frosted glass doors that muffled the main cafe's ambient noise. Evelyn arrived 15 minutes early, positioning herself at the small table with her back to the wall, wearing a simple black dress that revealed nothing of the chaos churning inside her. Daniel appeared exactly at 2 o'clock, looking uncomfortable in khaki pants and a button-down shirt that had probably been his best attempt at business casual. His hair was neatly combed, his face freshly shaved, but nothing could disguise the working-class reality of calloused hands and shoulders that had earned their strength through manual labor rather than personal trainers. He stood in the doorway for a moment, taking her in with an expression that was impossible to read. Then he crossed the room and sat across from her, his movements careful, controlled. "Thank you for coming," Evelyn said, her hands folded precisely on the table. "Thank you for calling." Daniel's eyes searched her face. "You look tired." "I haven't been sleeping well." She pushed a sealed envelope across the table. "These are the test results, medical confirmation. I'm approximately 4 weeks pregnant." Daniel picked up the envelope with steady hands, opened it, and read through the documentation with obvious care. His expression remained neutral, but Evelyn saw his jaw tighten slightly, his breathing shift. When he finally looked up, his eyes were clear and direct. "How are you feeling, physically, I mean? Any complications?" Again, concern for her before anything else. Evelyn felt something in her chest twist uncomfortably. "No complications yet. My doctor says everything appears normal, though at my age there are increased risks we'll need to monitor." She straightened her spine. "I asked you here to discuss our options and establish expectations." "Options." Daniel set the papers down carefully. "You mean whether you're keeping it?" "Keeping them," Evelyn corrected quietly. The ultrasound detected 2 heartbeats, twins. Daniel's composure cracked visibly. His eyes widened, his breath catching audibly. Twins? Apparently it runs in my family. My grandmother had twins, so did my great-aunt. Evelyn's voice remained steady through sheer force of will. The doctor said it's not uncommon in women my age, something about hormone levels and hyperovulation. Daniel leaned back in his chair, running both hands through his hair. Jesus, twins! Which makes this conversation even more critical. Evelyn pulled out a leather folder, opening it to reveal neatly printed documents. I've had my attorneys draft several options for how we might proceed. The first outlines full financial support with minimal involvement on your part. Essentially, I'd raise the children independently while ensuring you're compensated for your contribution and held harmless from any future obligations. No. Daniel's voice cut through her presentation like a blade. Evelyn paused. You haven't heard the terms. I don't need to. Daniel leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. I told you that night, I don't abandon children. I meant it. If you're keeping these babies, I'm involved, fully involved, not as some paid sperm donor, but as their father. You have no idea what you're committing to. Evelyn heard the edge creeping into her voice. 2 infants, the media attention, the scrutiny. Your life will never be private again. My life stopped being private when my wife died in a hospital hallway, and I had to explain to my daughter why mommy wasn't coming home. Daniel's jaw set stubbornly. I know exactly what I'm committing to. The question is whether you're willing to let me. Evelyn stared at him, genuinely caught off guard. She'd prepared for negotiation, for legal maneuvering, for the careful dance of protecting her interests while managing his expectations. She hadn't prepared for absolute, unflinching commitment. Why? The question escaped before she could stop it. You barely know me. You have a daughter to support. You're working a minimum wage job with no safety net. Taking on 2 more children would destroy any stability you've built. Because they're mine. Daniel's voice softened, but the steel beneath it remained. Because I know what it's like to grow up without a father. My dad left when I was 6. I know the hole that leaves. The questions that never get answered. I won't do that to my own kids, no matter how complicated the circumstances. Even if their mother is someone you slept with once in a moment of mutual desperation? Even then. Daniel held her gaze. Especially then. These babies didn't ask to be created. They deserve better than 2 parents who couldn't figure out how to put them first. Evelyn felt the careful control she'd maintained starting to fracture. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be a mother. I don't know how to co-parent with someone from a completely different world. I don't know how to balance an empire with 2 infants who'll need constant care and attention. Then we figure it out together. Daniel reached across the table, his calloused hand covering her perfectly manicured one. The contrast was stark, rough against smooth, working class against wealth, honest labor against inherited privilege. You wanted something real, something honest. This is what real looks like. It's messy and scary and full of unknowns. But we face it together instead of hiding behind contracts and compensation. Evelyn looked down at their joined hands, her throat tight. What if I'm terrible at it? What if I can't love them the way they deserve? What if you can? Daniel's thumb brushed across her knuckles. What if this is exactly what you've been missing? What if these babies give you something no board meeting or acquisition ever could? That's naive. Maybe. He smiled slightly. But Emma's taught me that kids don't need perfect parents. They need present ones. Parents who show up and try and admit when they mess up and keep trying anyway. Evelyn withdrew her hand slowly, needing the distance to think clearly. If we do this, if we actually commit to co-parenting, we need ground rules, boundaries, a clear understanding of expectations and responsibilities. Agreed. Daniel straightened in his chair. What did you have in mind? Evelyn pulled out a legal pad, her pen poised. This was familiar territory. Negotiation. Terms. Clearly defined parameters. First, paternity. I'll need you to sign an acknowledgement and submit to DNA testing once the babies are born. Not a problem. Second, custody arrangements. I'm willing to consider joint legal custody, but physical custody will need to be negotiated based on our respective living situations and work schedules. Daniel nodded slowly. I'd want regular, consistent time with them, not just occasional visits, real involvement in their daily lives. That's reasonable, though we'll need to work out logistics. Evelyn made notes. Third, financial support. I don't need your money, and I won't ask for it. I can provide everything the children need materially. But I contribute anyway. Daniel's voice was firm. Maybe not at your level, but I pay my share. They're my kids too. I support them. Evelyn looked up, surprised again by his insistence on equality when she was offering to shoulder the entire financial burden. That's not necessary. It is to me. Daniel met her eyes. I'm not looking for a handout or a free ride. I'm looking to be their father. Fathers provide for their children. Something in Evelyn's chest softened slightly. All right. We'll work out proportional support based on our respective incomes. Fourth, medical decisions. We need to establish how we'll handle healthcare choices, emergencies, and ongoing pediatric care. They spent the next hour hammering out details with surprising efficiency. Daniel proved thoughtful and practical, asking good questions and offering reasonable compromises. He didn't push for more than was sustainable, but he absolutely refused to be sidelined or treated as a secondary parent. When they finally exhausted the immediate logistics, Evelyn set down her pen and rubbed her temples. A headache was building behind her eyes, tension and pregnancy hormones combining into a dull throb. Are you all right? Daniel asked immediately. Just tired and overwhelmed and terrified I'm making a terrible mistake. Which part? Keeping the babies or involving me? Both, neither. I don't know. Evelyn closed her eyes. 3 weeks ago, my biggest concern was a hostile takeover attempt from a rival tech company. Now I'm pregnant with twins by someone I barely know, and I'm about to become a 40-year-old first-time mother to 3 children under 6. Wait, Daniel's voice sharpened. 3? Evelyn opened her eyes, confused. The twins make 2. Your daughter makes 3 total children between us. You're counting Emma? Of course I'm counting Emma. Evelyn frowned at his surprise. If we're co-parenting the twins, that means our families will be connected. Emma will be their half-sister. She's part of this equation whether we planned it that way or not. Daniel stared at her with an expression that might have been wonder or disbelief. You've thought about Emma, about how this affects her. I've thought about everything, Evelyn gestured at her notes, including the fact that bringing 2 infants into your life will impact your daughter significantly. She'll need preparation, support, help adjusting to the changes. We can't just spring this on her. When were you planning to tell her? I was hoping you'd take the lead on that. Evelyn's voice softened. She's your daughter. You know her best. You should be the one to explain in whatever way feels right for her age and temperament. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching her face like he was seeing her for the first time. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? I don't know, someone colder, more clinical, someone who'd try to minimize my involvement or buy me off. He shook his head slowly. But you're actually thinking about this like a parent, like someone who cares about getting it right. I'm terrified of getting it wrong. The admission escaped before Evelyn could censor it. I've never been responsible for another human life before. I've made million-dollar decisions without blinking, but the thought of holding an infant who depends on me for everything, that scares me more than any boardroom battle I've ever faced. Good, Daniel's voice was gentle. That fear means you'll try harder. You'll pay attention. You'll ask for help when you need it. He paused. And you will need help. We both will. I've already hired a specialist, Evelyn said. Dr. Sarah Chen. She's one of the top high-risk OB-GYNs in the city. Given my age and the fact that it's twins, we need the best medical care available. Can I come? To the appointments? The request surprised her. You want to be there? If you're comfortable with it, yes. I want to be involved from the beginning. Hear the heartbeats, see the ultrasounds, understand what's happening every step of the way. Evelyn felt something shift in her chest, a tiny crack in the armor she'd spent 40 years building. The next appointment is Thursday at 10. I can send you the details. I'll be there. Daniel pulled out his phone. Give me your number, the personal one, not the business line. They exchanged numbers in silence, the simple act feeling more intimate than it should. When Daniel stood to leave, Evelyn felt an unexpected reluctance to let him go. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't facing this alone. Daniel? She stopped him at the door. Thank you for not running, for being willing to try. He turned back, his expression serious. I could say the same to you. You could have handled this a dozen different ways. The fact that you're choosing the hard path, the one that involves me, that takes courage. Or stupidity. Maybe both. He smiled slightly. But we'll figure it out one day at a time. After he left, Evelyn sat alone in the private room, her hands resting unconsciously on her still flat stomach. 2 lives growing inside her. 2 babies who would change everything about the world she'd so carefully constructed. And 1 man who'd looked at her, really looked at her, and chosen to stay anyway. The following Thursday morning, Daniel arrived at Dr. Chen's office 15 minutes early, his hands sweating despite the building's aggressive air conditioning. The waiting room was elegant and quiet, filled with pregnant women in expensive maternity wear and partners who looked like they belonged in boardrooms. He felt completely out of place in his department store khakis and borrowed sport coat. Then Evelyn walked in, and every eye in the room turned toward her. She wore a simple cream-colored dress and minimal jewelry, but power radiated from her like heat. She spotted Daniel immediately, and something in her expression softened slightly as she crossed to where he stood. You came, she said quietly. I said I would. People say a lot of things. Evelyn's eyes searched his face. Following through is rarer. Before Daniel could respond, a nurse appeared in the doorway. Miss Cross, Dr. Chen is ready for you. Evelyn gestured for Daniel to follow. He did, acutely aware of the curious stares tracking their movement. The nurse led them to an examination room where Dr. Chen waited, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and an air of competent authority. Miss Cross, good to see you again. Dr. Chen's gaze shifted to Daniel. And you must be the father. Daniel Moore. He shook her hand, appreciating the firm professional grip. Dr. Sarah Chen, thank you for being here. Involved fathers make a significant positive difference in pregnancy outcomes. She gestured to the examination table. Ms. Cross, if you'll get settled, we'll do the ultrasound first and then discuss your test results. Evelyn changed behind a privacy screen while Dr. Chen prepared the ultrasound equipment. Daniel stood awkwardly to the side, unsure where to position himself until Evelyn emerged in a medical gown and patted the chair beside the examination table. You should be able to see the screen from there, she said, her voice neutral but her eyes uncertain. Daniel sat, his heart pounding. Dr. Chen dimmed the lights and began the ultrasound, the gel and transducer moving across Evelyn's abdomen with practiced efficiency. Static filled the screen, then shapes began to emerge, small, flickering movements that made Daniel's breath catch. There we are, Dr. Chen said warmly. Baby A and baby B right where they should be. Let's listen to the heartbeats. Sound filled the room, rapid, rhythmic, impossibly fast. 2 distinct patterns overlapping, 2 lives announcing themselves with urgent percussion. Daniel felt tears prick his eyes unexpectedly. He'd been through this with his wife 5 years ago, had heard Emma's heartbeat for the first time in a moment filled with joy and hope before everything went wrong. But this was different. These were his children, created in circumstances he'd never imagined, with a woman he barely knew. And they were real, alive, already fighting to exist. He looked at Evelyn and saw tears streaming silently down her face, her eyes locked on the screen with an expression of wonder and terror. Her hand gripped the edge of the examination table so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Without thinking, Daniel reached over and covered her hand with his. She startled slightly, then turned her palm up, lacing her fingers through his with desperate strength. Everything looks good, Dr. Chen said, pointing to various features on the screen. Both babies are measuring appropriately for gestational age. Strong heartbeats, good positioning. I'm very pleased with what I'm seeing. What about the risks? Evelyn's voice was unsteady. At my age, with twins, we'll monitor closely, Dr. Chen assured her. Yes, Advanced maternal age and twin pregnancy both carry increased risks. But you're healthy, you have access to excellent medical care, and you're taking this seriously. Those factors significantly improve outcomes. She smiled gently. I've delivered many healthy twins to mothers over 40. There's no reason to assume the worst. They spent another 30 minutes going over test results, nutrition recommendations, and scheduling future appointments. Dr. Chen was thorough but kind, addressing both Evelyn and Daniel equally, never making assumptions about their relationship or Daniel's level of involvement. When they finally left the office, stepping out into bright morning sunlight, Evelyn stopped on the sidewalk and just stood there, her hands still clutching the ultrasound printouts Dr. Chen had given them. "Are you all right?" Daniel asked quietly. "I heard their hearts." Evelyn's voice was barely above a whisper. "I heard them. And suddenly this became real in a way it hasn't been before. They're not just an idea or a problem to solve. They're people. Tiny people who need me to not screw this up. You won't screw it up. You don't know that." She looked at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I could be terrible at this. I could damage them irreparably, just by being who I am. Or you could love them fiercely and give them every advantage while learning to be present in their lives." Daniel touched her elbow gently. "You're already thinking about their well-being. That's what good parents do." Evelyn stared at the ultrasound images in her hands. "I need to tell my board, my executive team. The media will find out eventually, and I need to control the narrative before it controls me." "When?" "Soon, within the week." She took a shaky breath. "This will cause problems. Board members who question my judgment, shareholders who worry about my focus, competitors who will see this as weakness to exploit. Will it cost you the company?" "No, I own controlling interest. But it will cost me credibility, trust, the image of invulnerability I've spent decades building." Evelyn's jaw tightened. "People will assume I've lost my edge, that I've gone soft, that I'm no longer ruthless enough to lead." "Maybe that's not such a bad thing," Daniel said quietly. "Being ruthless." Evelyn's eyes snapped to his, sharp and defensive. Then, slowly, the fight drained out of her expression. "Maybe not, but it's all I've known how to be for a very long time." "Then maybe these babies will teach you something new." They stood in silence for a moment, two people from completely different worlds trying to build a bridge across the chasm separating them. Finally, Evelyn straightened her shoulders, the CEO reasserting herself. "I should get to the office. I have meetings this afternoon. And I need to pick up Emma from my mother's." Daniel hesitated. "When should we tell her? About the babies?" "Whenever you think she's ready. You're her father. You know best." "I'd like you to be there," Daniel said. "When I tell her, she should meet you, start understanding that you'll be part of her life now, too." Evelyn looked startled. "You want me to meet your daughter?" "She's going to have 2 siblings. That makes you family, whether we planned it that way or not." Daniel managed a small smile. "Besides, you counted her when you were thinking about our 3 kids. Seems only fair she gets to know who you are." "I don't know how to talk to children." "Just be honest. Kids appreciate honesty more than perfection." Evelyn was quiet for a long moment. Then, with visible effort, she nodded. "This weekend, Saturday afternoon, we'll meet somewhere neutral, somewhere she might feel comfortable. There's a park near my apartment, has a good playground. Emma loves it there. Send me the address." Evelyn clutched the ultrasound images like a lifeline. "And Daniel, thank you for being there today. It helped, having someone else who cares about them." "I'll always be there," Daniel said simply. "For every appointment, every milestone, every moment you'll let me share." Evelyn's eyes glistened again, but she blinked the tears back ruthlessly. "I need to go." She walked away quickly, climbing into the back of a sleek black car that had been waiting at the curb. Daniel watched her disappear into traffic, then looked down at his own ultrasound printout. 2 tiny shapes, 2 flickering heartbeats, 2 lives that would bind him to Evelyn Cross forever. He pulled out his phone and called his mother. "Hey, Mom, can you keep Emma this afternoon? Something's come up I need to handle." "Everything all right?" Daniel looked at the ultrasound image again, at the proof that his life was about to get infinitely more complicated. "Yeah, everything's about to change. but I think it might actually be all right. He spent the rest of the day trying to figure out how to explain to his 5-year-old daughter that their little family of 2 was about to become much bigger, and that the woman who'd help expand it was someone unlike anyone Emma had ever known. But as Daniel drove home through afternoon traffic, he felt something he hadn't experienced in 5 years. Hope that maybe, just maybe, broken people could build something whole if they were willing to try hard enough. Emma sat cross-legged on the living room floor, her favorite stuffed rabbit clutched in both hands, watching her father with eyes too perceptive for a 5-year-old. Daniel had been trying to find the right words for 20 minutes, starting and stopping half a dozen times while his daughter waited with patient curiosity. "Daddy, you're being weird," Emma finally announced, her gap-toothed smile taking any sting out of the observation. Daniel laughed despite his nerves. "Yeah, I guess I am. I need to tell you something important, sweetheart, and I'm not sure how to explain it." Emma set her rabbit down carefully. "Is it bad? Like when Mommy went to heaven?" The question hit Daniel square in the chest. "No, baby, nothing like that. This is actually something good. Different, but good. I hope." "Okay." Emma scooted closer, climbing onto the couch beside him. "You can tell me. I'm a good listener. Grandma says so." Daniel pulled her into his lap, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "You know how some families have just a mommy and daddy, and some have grandparents living with them, and some have lots of brothers and sisters? Like Madison at school, she has 3 brothers and they're really loud." "Exactly like that." Daniel chose his words carefully. "Well, our family is about to get bigger too. You're going to be a big sister." Emma's eyes went wide. "Really? Like a real sister? Not pretend?" "Real sisters. 2 of them, actually. Twins." "Twins?" Emma practically shouted, bouncing in his lap with sudden excitement. "That's so cool. When did they get here? Are they babies? Can I help take care of them?" "What are their names?" Daniel felt his chest tighten with relief at her enthusiasm. "They won't be here until next year. They're still growing right now, inside their mommy's tummy, and we haven't picked names yet." Emma's bouncing slowed, her expression turning thoughtful. "Who's their mommy? Is she going to live with us?" "Her name is Evelyn, and no, she won't live with us. She has her own home. But you'll see her a lot, and the babies will spend time with both of us." "Like how Madison's parents are divorced and she has 2 houses?" "Kind of like that, except Evelyn and I were never married. We're friends who are going to raise the babies together." Emma processed this with the seriousness she brought to all important matters. "Is she nice?" Daniel considered the question. "She's complicated. She works very hard and has a big important job, so sometimes she seems serious. But I think underneath she has a good heart. She's just learning how to show it." "Does she know about me?" "She does. And actually she wants to meet you this Saturday at your favorite park. Would that be okay?" Emma's face scrunched up with concentration. "What if she doesn't like me?" "She will." Daniel hugged her tighter. "How could anyone not like you? You're smart and funny and kind. Those are the most important things in the world." "What if I don't like her?" "Then you tell me and we'll talk about it. Your feelings matter, Emma. Always." He tilted her chin up so he could see her eyes. "These babies are your sisters. That means you're family with Evelyn too. Whether we all live in the same house or not. I need you to try to give her a chance, okay? She's new at this whole mom thing. She's probably pretty nervous about meeting you." Emma's expression shifted to something resembling pride. "I can help her. I know lots about being a kid. I could teach her stuff." Daniel felt tears prick his eyes. His daughter's capacity for acceptance and generosity never ceased to amaze him. "I think she'd really appreciate that." "Daddy?" Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. "Do you love her like you loved Mommy?" The question froze Daniel completely. He'd been so focused on logistics and co-parenting arrangements that he hadn't stopped to examine his actual feelings about Evelyn Cross beyond gratitude that she was willing to include him in their children's lives. "I don't know her well enough to know yet," he said honestly. "We're still learning about each other, but I care about making sure the babies are happy and healthy, and I think she cares about that too. Sometimes that's enough to start with." Emma seemed satisfied with this answer, She leaned against his chest, quiet for a moment before asking, "Can I tell Grandma? She's going to be so excited about twins." "We'll tell her together tomorrow." "But Emma?" "This is kind of a secret for now. Evelyn needs to tell the people at her work before everyone else finds out, so we can't tell your friends at school yet, okay?" "Okay." Emma yawned, her excitement giving way to the tiredness that always hit her around bedtime. "Daddy? I'm glad I'm going to be a big sister. I was lonely being the only kid sometimes." Daniel held her close, his heart too full for words. Everything about his life was about to become infinitely more complicated, but in this moment, with his daughter accepting the changes with open-hearted trust, he felt like maybe they'd actually survive it. Saturday afternoon arrived too quickly. Daniel stood at the park entrance, Emma's hand in his, watching Evelyn's black car pull into the parking lot. His daughter had insisted on wearing her favorite dress, purple with sunflowers, and had spent 20 minutes that morning making sure her hair was perfect for meeting the baby's mommy. Evelyn emerged from the car looking nothing like the CEO he'd seen at the doctor's office. She wore jeans and a simple white blouse, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail, minimal makeup. Dressed down, she looked younger, more vulnerable, and completely terrified. She approached them slowly, her movements uncertain. When she was about 10 feet away, she stopped, her eyes moving from Daniel to Emma with obvious anxiety. "Hi," Emma said brightly, breaking the tension. "You're Evelyn, right? I'm Emma. Daddy says you're having my sisters." Evelyn blinked, clearly thrown by the directness. "Yes, I'm Evelyn. It's very nice to meet you, Emma." "You're really pretty." Emma tilted her head, studying Evelyn with unabashed curiosity. "Daddy said you have an important job. What do you do?" "I run a company that makes technology, computers and software and things like that." "That sounds hard." "It can be." Evelyn glanced at Daniel helplessly, clearly out of her depth. Daniel gave her an encouraging smile. "Emma wanted to show you her favorite part of the playground, the one with the big slide. Right, sweetheart?" "Yeah, come on." Emma grabbed Evelyn's hand without hesitation, tugging her toward the play structure. Evelyn shot Daniel a panicked look over her shoulder, but allowed herself to be led across the wood-chip-covered playground. Daniel followed at a distance, giving them space while staying close enough to intervene if needed. Emma chattered continuously, explaining the social hierarchy of the playground equipment, the proper technique for the monkey bars, and the tragic history of how the swings had been replaced last month, with ones that weren't as good as the old ones. Evelyn listened with an intensity Daniel recognized from business meetings, as if Emma's observations were crucial data points requiring careful analysis. "You want to try the slide?" Emma asked, pausing at the base of the structure. "I'm not really dressed for—" "Come on, it's fun!" Emma was already climbing, her enthusiasm irresistible. Evelyn looked at Daniel. He shrugged, smiling. "When in Rome." "I hate you," Evelyn muttered, but she kicked off her expensive flats and followed Emma up the ladder. Daniel watched as Emma showed Evelyn the right way to go down the slide, positioning herself at the top and whooshing down with practiced ease. Evelyn followed more cautiously, her designer jeans thoroughly inappropriate for playground equipment, but her expression shifting from terror to something approaching enjoyment as she slid down. Emma met her at the bottom, beaming. "You did it! Want to go again?" They went down 7 more times, Emma's laughter bright and infectious, Evelyn's careful composure gradually dissolving into something more genuine. By the time they finally tired of the slide, Evelyn's hair had escaped its ponytail, and her cheeks were flushed with exertion and unmistakable happiness. "Can we get ice cream?" Emma asked, looking between her father and Evelyn hopefully. "If Evelyn has time," Daniel said carefully. Evelyn checked her phone, then slipped it back in her pocket with deliberate intention. "Ice cream sounds perfect." They walked to the small ice cream shop adjacent to the park, Emma between them, holding both their hands and swinging her arms dramatically. Daniel felt acutely aware of how they must look to strangers, like a family, complete and ordinary, despite the extraordinary circumstances that had brought them together. Inside the shop, Emma took her time selecting a flavor, interrogating the teenage server about the relative merits of cookie dough versus mint chocolate chip. Evelyn stood back, watching the exchange with fascination. She's very confident, Evelyn murmured to Daniel, and articulate for her age. She's had to grow up fast, Daniel said quietly. When it was just the two of us, I talked to her like a person, not a baby. She rose to the occasion. You've done an incredible job with her. I've done my best. Some days that's barely adequate. They got their ice cream and sat at one of the outdoor tables, Emma immediately diving into her cookie dough scoop with enthusiastic determination. Evelyn picked at her vanilla, her movements careful, controlled. So, Emma said, chocolate already smudged on her chin, when the babies come, are they going to live with you or with us? Evelyn set down her spoon. We're still figuring that out. Probably they'll spend some time at each house. That's good. Then they get 2 bedrooms and 2 sets of toys. Emma licked her spoon thoughtfully. Do you have a house or an apartment? A penthouse. It's a very large apartment at the top of a tall building. Emma's eyes widened. Like a castle? A bit like that, yes. Cool. Emma swung her legs under the table. Can I see it sometime? Evelyn glanced at Daniel, uncertainty flickering across her face. If your father says it's all right, you'd be welcome to visit. Can we, Daddy? Please? Daniel looked at Evelyn, reading the genuine invitation beneath her careful words. Maybe in a few weeks. Give Evelyn time to prepare. Okay. Emma returned to her ice cream, satisfied with the promise. They finished their cones in companionable silence, the afternoon sun warm on their faces, the park humming with the ambient noise of other families. Daniel watched Evelyn watching Emma, seeing calculation give way to something softer, more uncertain, but also more real. When Emma ran off to throw away her napkin, Evelyn leaned closer to Daniel. Is it always this easy with her? You caught her on a good day, Daniel admitted. But yeah, she's generally pretty adaptable. She's had to be. She accepted me without question, without judgment. Evelyn's voice was tight. I don't understand why. Because you're giving her sisters. Because I told her you were important. Because kids don't carry the same baggage adults do about class and status and all the artificial barriers we construct. Daniel met her eyes. You're overthinking this. I overthink everything. I've noticed. Evelyn almost smiled. This is strange. Sitting here with you and your daughter, eating ice cream, pretending to be normal people. We are normal people. You just forgot what that felt like. Emma returned and climbed into the chair between them, reaching for Evelyn's hand with sticky fingers. I'm glad you're having my sisters. I think you're going to be a good mom. Evelyn's breath caught audibly. Her eyes glistened as she looked down at Emma's small hand in hers. Thank you, Emma. That means more than you know. You're welcome. Emma squeezed her fingers. And if you need help learning mom stuff, I can teach you. I know lots of things like how to make pillow forts and the best bedtime stories, and which vegetables are actually gross even though grown-ups say they're good. This time Evelyn did smile, a real smile that transformed her entire face. I would very much appreciate your expertise. They walked back to the parking lot slowly, Emma chattering about school and her friends and the science project she was working on with her grandmother. Evelyn listened with genuine attention, asking questions that showed she was actually processing the information rather than just being polite. At Evelyn's car, Emma hugged her without hesitation. Bye, Evelyn. See you soon, okay? Evelyn looked stunned by the easy affection, but she returned the hug carefully. Yes, very soon. After Emma ran ahead to their car, Evelyn turned to Daniel. She's extraordinary. You should be very proud. I am. Daniel paused. She likes you. That's not something she gives easily. I was terrified, Evelyn admitted. I didn't know how to talk to her, how to act, what she'd need from me. You were perfect. You showed up. You listened. You let her lead. That's exactly what kids need. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. My board meeting is Monday. I'm announcing the pregnancy. After that, the media will tear this apart. Your life is about to become very public. Emma's life, too. Daniel felt his stomach tighten. I figured as much. I can have my attorneys draft protective orders, limit media access to you and Emma, create some boundaries around what they can publish about a minor. Do whatever you think is necessary. Daniel met her eyes. But Evelyn, don't protect us so much that we're not part of your life. Emma needs to understand that her sister's mother is real, accessible, present, not some distant figure behind legal walls. I'm trying to protect you. I know, and I appreciate it. But we're in this together, remember? That means accepting the complications that come with your world, not hiding from them. Evelyn stared at him for a long moment. You're either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. Probably both. Daniel smiled slightly. But I meant what I said. We're family now. Families face things together. Monday morning, Evelyn stood before her board of directors in the conference room that had witnessed countless battles for corporate dominance. 23 faces stared back at her, mostly men, mostly older, all accustomed to power and control. She'd called an emergency meeting, refusing to provide details beyond a significant personal announcement requiring board awareness. The speculation had been running wild all weekend. Hostile takeover, sudden illness, retirement. No one had guessed the truth. Evelyn gripped the edge of the podium, her notes unnecessary. She'd rehearsed this speech 100 times, refining every word to minimize damage while maintaining honesty. But standing here, facing the men who doubted her at every turn of her rise to power, she felt her carefully prepared remarks dissolve. I'm pregnant, she said simply. 16 weeks. Twins. Due in February. The silence was absolute. Shock rippled through the room like a physical wave. Richard Thornton, the board's longest-serving member and her most consistent opponent, found his voice first. Is this a joke? No. Evelyn met his eyes steadily. I'm 40 years old and pregnant with twins. I will continue serving as CEO throughout the pregnancy and after the children are born, with appropriate maternity leave arranged to minimize disruption to company operations. Who's the father? Another board member demanded. That's irrelevant to this company's operations and none of your business. Evelyn's voice hardened. My personal life remains personal. What matters to this board is my commitment to Cross Industries and my ability to lead effectively. Neither has changed. Your judgment has clearly changed, Thornton said coldly. 40 years old, unmarried, pregnant by someone you won't even name. This is exactly the kind of impulsive, reckless behavior we feared would eventually surface. Evelyn felt rage rise in her chest, but she channeled it into icy precision. I've built this company from a failing legacy operation into a $12 billion global enterprise. My judgment has made every person in this room substantially wealthier. Don't confuse my personal choices with professional competence. The media will crucify you, another member warned. Shareholders will panic. This will tank our stock price. Then we manage it. Evelyn pulled out detailed projections. I've prepared comprehensive communication strategies, transition plans for temporary delegation during maternity leave, and contingency protocols for any scenario you can imagine. I've also retained crisis management specialists who've handled far worse situations than a CEO having children. At 40, Thornton repeated, unmarried. This isn't the 1950s, but it's not good optics for a woman in your position. My position is CEO and majority shareholder, Evelyn said sharply. I don't serve at your pleasure. I built this empire. I own controlling interest, and I will continue leading this company while also becoming a mother. Millions of women do both every day. The only difference is that my pregnancy will be public. And the father? Thornton pressed. When the media discovers his identity, what then? If he's married, if there's scandal, he's a widower, a single father, a good man who's committed to co-parenting these children responsibly. Evelyn's voice softened slightly. There's no scandal, no affair, no betrayal, just two adults navigating an unexpected situation with integrity. The room exploded in overlapping questions and objections. Evelyn let them vent, watching the panic spread, calculating who would remain loyal and who would use this as ammunition for eventual coups. When the noise finally died down, she spoke with absolute authority. Here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow morning, we release a carefully worded statement announcing my pregnancy, emphasizing my continued commitment to the company, and making it clear that Cross Industries remains my top priority alongside my expanding family. We control the narrative before tabloids do. We present this as strength, not weakness, a woman who can build empires and families simultaneously. The stock will still drop, someone muttered. Probably. Evelyn acknowledged. Short-term volatility is expected, but our fundamentals are strong. Our pipeline is solid. My pregnancy doesn't change our Q4 projections or our 5-year strategic plan. The market will stabilize once they see business as usual continues. And when you're on maternity leave? Sarah Chen will serve as acting CEO. Evelyn nodded to her COO, the only woman on the board besides herself. She's been my second in command for 8 years. She knows this company as well as I do. The transition will be seamless. The meeting continued for another 2 hours, Evelyn fielding questions with the same ruthless competence that had built her empire. By the end, grudging acceptance had replaced open hostility, though she knew Thornton and his allies would be watching for any sign of weakness to exploit. When she finally escaped to her office, she found Daniel waiting in the reception area, looking uncomfortable in the sleek corporate environment. "What are you doing here?" she asked, more sharply than intended. "Moral support." He stood, his eyes searching her face. How bad was it? Evelyn felt something in her chest crack. The careful composure she'd maintained through the meeting suddenly felt too heavy to carry. Terrible. They looked at me like I'd lost my mind, like getting pregnant was proof I'd gone soft. You're the farthest thing from soft I've ever met. They don't see it that way. They see vulnerability, distraction, weakness to exploit. She pressed her fingers against her temples. The stock's going to tank tomorrow. Shareholders will revolt. Competitors will circle. Then you fight back. Daniel moved closer. Like you always have. I'm tired of fighting. The admission escaped before she could stop it. I'm tired of proving myself to men who will never truly accept that a woman can have both power and humanity. I'm tired of choosing between empire and everything else. So stop choosing. Daniel's voice was gentle. Do both. Let them see that you can lead a company and raise children, that being a mother doesn't make you less formidable. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, it's nearly impossible, but you've built a career on doing impossible things. He reached for her hand, and this time you don't have to do it alone. Evelyn looked down at their joined hands, his calloused and scarred from manual labor, hers perfectly manicured despite the chaos of her life. Two people who shouldn't fit together, who came from worlds so different they might as well be speaking different languages. But their children would bridge that gap, would carry both their worlds in tiny bodies that understood nothing of class or status or artificial barriers. I need to call my publicist, Evelyn said quietly. Get ahead of the story before it gets ahead of me. And I need to prepare Emma. Once this goes public, people will dig into my background, find out about her mother's death. They'll use anything they can to make this messy. I'll protect her, Evelyn said fiercely. Whatever it takes. I know. Daniel squeezed her hand. Just like I'll protect you when they try to tear you apart for being human. Tuesday morning, Cross Industries released a statement that sent shockwaves through the business world. By noon, stock prices had dropped 12%. By evening, every major news outlet was running stories analyzing Evelyn Cross's surprise pregnancy and speculating wildly about the mystery father. Daniel's phone rang constantly, reporters who'd somehow gotten his number, offering money for his story, for photographs, for any detail about his relationship with the billionaire CEO. He ignored them all, focusing instead on keeping Emma's routine as normal as possible while their small apartment became a fortress under siege. At school pickup, photographers waited. Daniel called the principal, who arranged for security to escort Emma through a back entrance. That night, Daniel sat with his daughter explaining why strangers wanted to take their picture, why they needed to be careful about what they said to people they didn't know. Emma listened with solemn attention, then asked, Are people being mean to Evelyn because of the babies? Some people are, Daniel admitted. They don't understand that she can be a good boss and a good mom at the same time. That's dumb, Emma frowned. You're a good dad and you have a job too. It's different for women, sweetheart. People judge them more harshly. Well, that's not fair, Emma crossed her arms with righteous indignation. We should tell them to stop being mean. Daniel pulled her close. We help by being there for her, by showing that our family is strong even when people try to make it look weak. The media frenzy intensified over the following days. Tabloids ran increasingly intrusive stories, some true, most fabricated. Evelyn's every movement was documented, analyzed, criticized. Her clothes, her schedule, her apparent stress, all became fodder for public consumption. Then Daniel's identity leaked. He woke Friday morning to find his face plastered across gossip sites. Billionaire CEO's baby daddy, revealed janitor with dead wife and secret past. The headlines were brutal, turning his life into entertainment, Emma's mother's death into scandalous backstory. Daniel sat at his kitchen table, hands shaking with rage, reading lie after lie about his marriage, his daughter, his supposed gold-digging scheme to trap Evelyn Cross into supporting him. They'd found his employment records, his wife's death certificate, even tracked down Emma's kindergarten. His phone buzzed. Evelyn. "I'm so sorry," she said immediately. "My team is working on getting the worst stories retracted. We're filing lawsuits for libel. I never wanted this to touch you and Emma." "It's not your fault." Daniel's voice was hollow. "I knew this would happen. I just didn't expect it to feel this violating." "Come stay at my place," Evelyn said urgently. "Both of you. My building has security. They can't get to you there." "Evelyn, please, let me protect you. Let me do something useful instead of just watching you suffer because of me." Daniel looked around his small apartment, at the windows where camera flashes occasionally erupted from the street below, at Emma's bedroom where his daughter pretended not to hear the shouting reporters. "Okay," he said quietly. "We'll come. Just until this dies down." "Thank you." Evelyn's relief was palpable. "I'm sending a car. Pack whatever you need for a few days." That evening, Daniel and Emma arrived at Evelyn's penthouse, carrying hastily packed bags, exhausted from navigating through crowds of photographers and reporters who'd shouted questions Emma was too young to understand. Evelyn met them at the private elevator, her face tight with guilt and anger. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. This is all my fault." Emma dropped her bag and hugged Evelyn around the waist. "It's not your fault people are being jerks." Evelyn made a sound between a laugh and a sob, her arms coming around Emma automatically. "You're right, but I still hate that you're dealing with this because of me." "We're family," Emma said simply. "Family helps each other." Over Emma's head, Evelyn's eyes met Daniel's. Something passed between them. Understanding, gratitude, the first fragile recognition that they were building something real from the wreckage of their separate loneliness. "Come on," Evelyn said, pulling back and wiping her eyes quickly. "Let me show you where you'll stay. And Emma, I had something delivered this afternoon that I think you'll like." She led them to a guest suite that was twice the size of Daniel's entire apartment, beautifully appointed with views across the city. In the corner sat a brand new dollhouse, elaborate and expensive, clearly chosen to make a little girl feel welcome. Emma gasped, "Is that for me?" "If you want it," Evelyn smiled tentatively. "I wasn't sure what you'd like, so I asked the store for their best recommendation for a 5-year-old. Emma ran to the dollhouse, already examining it with delighted fascination. Daniel moved close to Evelyn, keeping his voice low. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to. She's here because of choices I made. The least I can do is make her comfortable." Daniel watched Emma playing, then looked back at Evelyn. "We're going to be okay. All of us. This media circus will pass, and when it does, we'll still be standing." "You sound very certain." "I am." Daniel touched her hand briefly. "Because we're not giving them anything real to destroy. We're just two people trying to do right by our kids. There's no scandal in that, just life." Evelyn leaned against him slightly, the first truly vulnerable gesture she'd allowed in his presence. "I hope you're right." "I usually am." Daniel smiled. "About the important things, anyway." That night, with Emma asleep in the guest room and the city lights glittering 40 floors below, Daniel and Evelyn sat together in her living room, talking until dawn about how to weather the storm that showed no signs of stopping. Neither knew that the worst was still to come. The emergency board meeting was called for 8 in the morning, 3 weeks after the media storm had begun. Evelyn sat alone in her office beforehand, staring at the letter Richard Thornton had delivered personally the previous evening. A vote of no confidence. 17 board members had signed it, demanding her immediate resignation as CEO, citing severely compromised judgment and conduct unbecoming of leadership. They were staging a coup. Evelyn's hands trembled as she set the letter down. In 40 years of ruthless corporate warfare, she'd never felt this particular species of fear. They weren't just attacking her competence or her business decisions. They were attacking her choice to become a mother, weaponizing her pregnancy as proof she'd lost the killer instinct required to lead. Her phone buzzed. Daniel, checking in from the penthouse where he'd been staying with Emma for the past 3 weeks while reporters continued their siege. "How are you holding up?" His voice was warm, concerned, grounding. "They're trying to force me out," Evelyn said flatly. "Vote of no confidence. Thornton's been building a coalition for weeks. Today they make their move." Silence on the other end. "Then, what are you going to do?" "Fight. What else can I do?" Evelyn closed her eyes. "But Daniel, if I lose this, I lose everything. The company, my reputation, the empire I've spent 40 years building." "You don't lose everything." His voice was steady, certain. "You'd still have the twins. You'd still have Emma. You'd still have me. That's not nothing. It's not $12 billion and the power to shape global markets." "No," Daniel agreed quietly. "It's better, because it's real. Because it'll still matter when all the rest of this turns to dust." Evelyn felt tears prick her eyes. "I don't know how to be just a person. I've been a CEO for so long, I've forgotten what exists underneath the title." Then maybe it's time to remember." Daniel paused. "But Evelyn, you're not going to lose. You're the smartest, most strategic person I've ever met. They're underestimating you because you're pregnant. That's their mistake. What if it's not enough? Then we figure out what comes next together. But don't surrender before the fight even starts. That's not who you are." After they hung up, Evelyn sat in silence, Daniel's words echoing in her mind. She'd built her entire identity around corporate dominance, believing that power was the only currency that mattered. But these past weeks, living in close quarters with Daniel and Emma, watching her daughter's sisters grow inside her, she'd glimpsed something different. Connection without transaction, love without leverage, family without conditions. And she'd realized, with startling clarity, that Richard Thornton was right about one thing. She had changed. The question was whether change meant weakness, or if it meant finally becoming whole. Evelyn stood, smoothed her tailored suit, and walked into the boardroom like she was walking into battle. 23 faces turned toward her, expressions ranging from hostile to uncomfortable to carefully neutral. Richard Thornton sat at the head of the table with barely concealed triumph, the letter of no confidence positioned prominently before him. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Evelyn said, her voice calm and controlled as she took her seat. "I understand we have significant matters to discuss." "Indeed we do." Thornton's smile was sharp. "Ms. Cross, over the past 3 weeks, this company has suffered unprecedented damage to its reputation and market value. Stock prices have plummeted 28%. 3 major clients have postponed contract renewals pending leadership stability review. Our competitors are actively poaching our top talent with promises of a more professional corporate culture." He tapped the letter. "This board has lost confidence in your ability to lead effectively. We're calling for your immediate resignation as CEO, with a generous severance package and your continued position as majority shareholder without operational involvement." "You want me to step down because I'm pregnant," Evelyn said bluntly. "We want you to step down because your personal choices have created a corporate crisis." Thornton leaned forward. "The media circus, the scandal, the distraction. This isn't about gender or motherhood. This is about judgment and priorities. You've demonstrated that your focus is no longer primarily on this company's success." "My focus built this company into what it is today." Evelyn's voice hardened. "I took my father's failing legacy operation and transformed it into a global technology leader. I've delivered consistent growth for 15 consecutive years. I've made every person in this room wealthy beyond most people's dreams. And now you want to erase all of that because I'm having children?" "We want stability," another board member interjected. "We want a CEO whose personal life doesn't dominate headlines and tank stock prices." "Then you want a robot, not a leader." Evelyn stood, pacing slowly around the table. "You want someone who will sacrifice their entire humanity on the altar of quarterly earnings, someone who will die alone in an empty office, having built empires but never built a family. Someone who'll look back at the end and wonder what it was all for. She stopped, meeting each board member's eyes in turn. I was that person. For 40 years, I was exactly what you're describing, and I was miserable, successful, powerful, and completely hollowed out inside. So you admit your priorities have changed, Thornton pressed. Yes. Evelyn's answer surprised them. My priorities have changed. I still care deeply about this company's success, but I also care about being a mother to the children I'm carrying, about being present in their lives and teaching them that success without humanity is just emptiness wearing expensive suits. She returned to her seat, her posture straight, her voice unwavering. What you're calling compromised judgment, I call growth. What you're calling distraction, I call finally understanding what actually matters. Beautiful sentiment, Thornton said dismissively. But sentiment doesn't run a $12 billion company. No, strategy runs companies. Vision runs companies. The ability to anticipate market shifts and position for advantage runs companies. Evelyn pulled out a presentation folder. All of which I've continued to do flawlessly despite being pregnant. Our Q4 projections are up 8% over last year. The AI integration project I've been spearheading just secured 3 major enterprise clients worth a combined $1.2 billion over 5 years. Our product pipeline is the strongest it's been in a decade. She slid the folder across to Thornton. The stock price drop you're citing? Market overreaction to sensationalized media coverage that has nothing to do with actual business fundamentals. It's already recovering as analysts look past the headlines to our actual performance. Murmurs rippled through the room. Several board members leaned forward, reading the projections with obvious interest. You're asking me to resign because you're embarrassed, Evelyn continued, because having a pregnant CEO doesn't fit your image of corporate professionalism, because you fundamentally believe that women can't be both effective leaders and mothers, despite millions of working mothers proving that assumption wrong every single day. Her voice grew sharper. Well, I'm not resigning. I'm not abandoning the company I built because you're uncomfortable with my personal choices. And I'm certainly not validating the sexist assumption that pregnancy equals incompetence. This isn't about sexism, Thornton snapped. This is about the scandal, the tabloid headlines, the father being a janitor, for God's sake. You've made us a laughingstock. Daniel Moore is a good man. Evelyn's voice went dangerously quiet. A widower who raised his daughter alone while working multiple jobs to keep them housed and fed. A man with more integrity and character than anyone in this room, including me. The fact that you're using his occupation as ammunition tells me everything I need to know about your values. His occupation is irrelevant, Thornton said coldly. What's relevant is that you showed catastrophically poor judgment in your personal life, and we have no reason to believe that judgment won't extend to business decisions. Then vote me out. Evelyn's challenge hung in the air. Call your vote of no confidence. See how it goes. But before you do, I want everyone in this room to understand the consequences. She stood again, her presence commanding absolute attention. I own 42% of this company. My father's trust owns another 18%, which votes with me per the trust documents. That's 60%. You literally cannot remove me without my consent, no matter how many board members sign your little letter. Thornton's face went white. You're bluffing. Call my general counsel if you doubt me. Evelyn's smile was cold. You forgot who actually owns this company in your rush to stage a coup. This isn't a publicly held corporation where boards can override founders. This is my company. I built it. I own it. And you serve at my pleasure, not the other way around. The room erupted in overlapping arguments and shocked exclamations. Evelyn let the chaos build before speaking again, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. However, I understand your concerns about continuity and stability. So here's what I'm proposing. I remain CEO through the pregnancy and delivery. Sarah Chen assumes the role of acting CEO during my 3-month maternity leave with full authority to make operational decisions. I return part-time initially, building back to full-time over 6 months as we establish childcare routines and systems. Throughout this entire period, I maintain ultimate strategic authority, but day-to-day operations flow through Sarah during my reduced capacity. She looked at her COO. Sarah, are you willing to take this on? Sarah Chen, who'd been silent throughout the meeting, spoke up clearly. I am. I've been preparing for increased responsibility for years. This company is in excellent hands. There, Evelyn said. A succession plan that maintains leadership continuity while allowing me to be present for my children's early months. Everyone gets what they need. And after that, Thornton demanded, when childcare falls apart or the twins get sick or any of the 1,000 things that derail working mothers, what happens to this company then? The same thing that happens when any executive faces family demands, Evelyn shot back. We adapt, we delegate, we build support systems and backup plans. We do what working parents have been doing since the beginning of time. She leaned forward, her eyes locked on Thornton. Or did you forget that you've left board meetings early for your son's soccer games? That Peterson takes calls from his wife during presentations? That half the men in this room have canceled meetings for family emergencies without anyone questioning their commitment or competence? Silence. Uncomfortable, damning silence. The only difference, Evelyn continued quietly, is that when men make space for family alongside career, it's seen as admirable. When women do it, it's seen as weakness. Well, I'm done accepting that double standard. I'm having these babies. I'm raising them alongside running this company. And I'm going to prove that women can do both without sacrificing excellence in either domain. She sat back down, her hands folded calmly on the table despite her racing heart. Now you can continue wasting energy on a coup that legally cannot succeed, or you can redirect that energy toward actually supporting this transition and capitalizing on our strong market position. Your choice. Thornton stared at her with undisguised hatred, but he was trapped, and he knew it. Without the votes to actually remove her, his rebellion was theater. Fine, he said through gritted teeth, but understand this, Ms. Cross. Every mistake, every slip, every moment where your divided attention costs this company, we'll be watching. And the second you prove us right about your compromised judgment, we'll be here to say we told you so. I'd expect nothing less. Evelyn's smile was sharp. Now, if we're done with the attempted mutiny, we have actual business to discuss. The Henderson acquisition is entering final negotiations, and I need this board's approval on the purchase price structure. The meeting continued, stilted and tense, but Evelyn had won. She'd retained her position, established clear boundaries, and proven that pregnancy didn't equal vulnerability. But the victory felt hollow. She'd saved her empire by wielding the very power and ruthlessness these men respected, all while arguing that she was something more than that. The contradiction gnawed at her through the rest of the day. That evening, she returned to the penthouse exhausted and emotionally raw. Daniel was in the kitchen making dinner while Emma sat at the counter doing homework, a scene of domestic normalcy that felt surreal against the backdrop of corporate warfare. How did it go? Daniel asked, reading her face. I won. They tried to force me out. I reminded them I own the company. End of coup. Evelyn set down her briefcase heavily. I should feel triumphant. Instead, I just feel tired. Because you had to choose between being human and being powerful, Daniel said quietly. And you proved you could be both, but it cost you something to fight that fight. Exactly. Evelyn slumped onto a bar stool. I stood there arguing that I could be a good mother and a good CEO, and I used the same cold, calculating dominance I've always used. I threatened them. I wielded ownership stakes like weapons. I proved I was still ruthless enough to lead by being ruthless in that meeting. But you were fighting for your right to be more than ruthless, Daniel pointed out. That's different. Emma looked up from her math worksheet. Did you win? Yes, sweetheart, I won. Good. Emma returned to her homework with the uncomplicated certainty of childhood. Bad guys shouldn't win. Evelyn felt something in her chest twist. I'm not sure I was entirely the good guy in that scenario. You were protecting your babies, Emma said matter-of-factly. That makes you the good guy. Mamas protect their babies. Everyone knows that. Daniel met Evelyn's eyes over Emma's head, his expression gentle. Out of the mouths of babes. They ate dinner together, the conversation gradually shifting from corporate politics to Emma's upcoming school play, and Daniel's plans to finally finish his engineering degree online. Normal family conversation, except nothing about their situation was normal. After Emma went to bed, Daniel and Evelyn sat on the balcony overlooking the city, the November wind cold against their faces. "I can't keep living in your penthouse forever," Daniel said quietly. "This isn't sustainable." "Why not?" Evelyn didn't look at him. "You're safe here. Emma's safe. The media can't get to you." "Because it's not our home. Because Emma needs stability, not a borrowed room in a borrowed life." Daniel paused. "Because you need your space back, and I need to feel like something more than a kept man hiding in a billionaire's tower." "I don't think of you that way." "I know, but I think of myself that way. I haven't worked in 3 weeks. I'm living rent-free in luxury I could never afford. I'm completely dependent on your protection and generosity." His voice roughened. "That's not who I am. That's not the example I want to set for Emma." Evelyn finally turned to look at him. "What do you want?" "I don't know." Daniel ran both hands through his hair. "I want the media to move on to the next scandal. I want my daughter to go to school without photographers waiting. I want to work and support my family without being labeled a gold digger or a leech. I want—" He broke off, shaking his head. "What?" "I want to know what we're actually doing here." Daniel gestured between them. "We're co-parenting twins. We're living together temporarily. Emma calls you by your first name and hugs you goodnight. We have dinner like a family and talk about our days and navigate domestic logistics like we've been doing this for years." He met her eyes. "But we're not actually together. We're not a couple. We're two people bound by biology and circumstance, pretending at normalcy while both of our lives fall apart." Evelyn felt her breath catch. "Is that what you want? To be together?" "I don't know." Daniel's honesty was painful. "I barely know you, Evelyn. I know you're brilliant and terrifying and deeply lonely underneath all that armor. I know you're trying harder than anyone gives you credit for to be a good mother before the babies even arrive. I know Emma adores you, and you're gentler with her than you are with anyone else." He looked away. "But I don't know if that's enough to build an actual relationship on, and I don't know if trying would help our kids or hurt them if it falls apart. So what do we do? We keep doing what we're doing. We co-parent. We support each other. We build trust." Daniel's voice softened. "And maybe, eventually, we figure out if there's something real between us beyond just shared responsibility for 3 kids." "That's very rational. You sound disappointed." "I'm not used to rational when it comes to relationships." Evelyn pulled her cardigan tighter against the wind. "Every man I've dated wanted something from me. Access to my money, my connections, my power. You're the first person who seems to want nothing beyond what's best for our children." "That's not entirely true." Daniel smiled slightly. "I want you to be happy. I want you to find whatever balance makes you feel whole instead of hollowed out. I want these babies to have a mother who's present and engaged instead of just writing checks from a distance." He reached over, taking her hand. "I want you to remember what it feels like to be human." Evelyn's throat tightened. "What if I've forgotten? What if I've spent so long being the Ice Queen CEO that there's nothing warm left underneath? Then we'll find it together." Daniel squeezed her fingers. "One day at a time. One moment of genuine connection at a time. One instance of choosing vulnerability over control." They sat in silence, hands linked, watching the city lights blur and shimmer 40 floors below. Somewhere in the building, Emma slept peacefully, trusting the adults to figure out complicated things. And inside Evelyn, 2 tiny lives grew, unaware of the chaos surrounding their impending arrival. 2 weeks later, the media storm finally began to recede. A celebrity divorce dominated headlines, shifting attention away from Evelyn's pregnancy. Daniel returned to work, though Evelyn had quietly arranged for him to be transferred to a day shift position in building maintenance with substantially better pay, framing it as a company-wide restructuring rather than favoritism. Emma went back to school with security protocols in place. Life started resembling normalcy again, though Daniel and Emma continued staying at the penthouse on weekends, slowly building routines that felt almost like family. Then, at 28 weeks pregnant, Evelyn went into early labor. She was at the office reviewing contracts when the first contraction hit. Sharp, unmistakable, far too early. She pressed the intercom for her assistant with shaking hands. "Call Dr. Chen. Tell her I'm having contractions. And call Daniel. Tell him to meet me at the hospital." The next hour blurred into chaos. Ambulance, emergency room, doctor. Chen's concerned face hovering above her. Daniel bursting through the door, his face white with fear, reaching for her hand immediately. "It's too early," Evelyn gasped between contractions. 28 weeks. They're too small. They're not ready. "We're going to stop the labor," Dr. Chen said firmly, already preparing medications. Bed rest, tocolytics to stop contractions, steroids to help develop the baby's lungs in case we can't hold off delivery. "But Evelyn, you need to understand this is serious. Your body is trying to deliver these babies 12 weeks early." "Why?" Evelyn's fingers dug into Daniel's hand. "What did I do wrong?" "Nothing. Sometimes this just happens with twins. Sometimes bodies decide they're done carrying." Dr. Chen met her eyes. "But we're going to fight to keep them in there as long as possible. Every day matters at this stage." The medication worked. The contractions slowed, then stopped. But the reprieve came with strict conditions. Complete bed rest. No work. No stress. Weekly monitoring. The slightest sign of renewed labor meant immediate hospitalization. Evelyn lay in the hospital bed that night, Daniel in the chair beside her, and felt control slip completely through her fingers. "I can't run the company from bed," she whispered. "Then you don't run it for a while." Daniel's voice was gentle but firm. "You let Sarah handle operations. You focus on keeping these babies safe." "I don't know how to not work. I don't know how to just be still." "Then you learn." Daniel brushed hair back from her face. "Because your daughters need you alive and healthy more than Cross Industries needs your constant oversight." Evelyn closed her eyes, tears leaking from the corners. "I'm scared. I'm so scared. What if I can't stop it next time? What if they come too early and don't survive? What if I lose them because I couldn't give up control long enough to keep them safe?" "Hey," Daniel's hand cupped her face. "Look at me." She opened her eyes, meeting his steady gaze. "You didn't cause this," he said clearly. "Your body is doing what twin pregnancies sometimes do. This isn't punishment for working too hard or caring about your company. This is biology, and we're going to handle it the same way we've handled everything else, together, one day at a time, with every resource and advantage we can leverage to give these girls the best chance possible." "What about Emma? Who's watching her?" "My mother picked her up from school. She'll stay with her until I get back." Daniel smiled slightly. "Emma made me promise to tell you she loves you and she's praying for her sisters to stay cooking a little longer." Her words, not mine. Despite everything, Evelyn laughed weakly. That child is impossibly sweet. "She gets it from her mother." Daniel's voice softened with old grief. "Sarah was like that too. Always seeing the best in people. Always believing things would work out." "Does Emma remember her?" "No, she was only a few days old when Sarah died." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "But I tell her stories, show her pictures, make sure she knows her mother loved her more than anything in the world." "Will you tell the twins about tonight?" Evelyn asked. "When they're older, about how they almost came too early?" "I'll tell them about how their mother fought to keep them safe, how she gave up control of her empire to give them a chance at life, how she chose them over everything else when it mattered most." Daniel's thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "I'll tell them she was terrified but brave, that she learned to be still because they needed her to be." Evelyn felt more tears fall, but she didn't try to stop them. For the first time in 40 years, she let someone see her completely vulnerable, completely afraid, completely human. And Daniel stayed. Evelyn was released from the hospital 3 days later with strict instructions and a nursery worth of monitoring equipment. She set up residence in her bedroom, laptop nearby but largely ignored, phone on silent, the world of corporate dominance receding into background noise. Daniel brought Emma by every evening after school. They'd sit on the bed with her, Emma chattering about her day while Daniel made sure Evelyn ate properly and took her medications. Sarah Chen video called daily with company updates, handling everything with competence that should have made Evelyn feel obsolete, but instead brought profound relief. The twins cooperated. Weeks passed without renewed contractions. Evelyn's body settled into uneasy equilibrium, carrying the girls through week 29, then 30, then 32. But the forced stillness did something unexpected. It cracked open spaces in Evelyn's carefully controlled life where real reflection could take root. She started reading parenting books instead of business journals. She talked to Daniel about hopes and fears instead of strategy and logistics. She let Emma paint her toenails and teach her hand-clapping games and show her what it meant to be present without agenda. And slowly, the Ice Queen CEO began to thaw. At 34 weeks, Dr. Chen finally cleared Evelyn for limited activity. The immediate danger had passed. The twins were measuring well. Their lungs developed enough to function if they decided to make an early appearance. Evelyn could resume some normalcy while staying cautious. The first place she went was Emma's school play. Daniel had mentioned it weeks ago, but Evelyn had been too consumed with work to truly register the invitation. Now, sitting in an elementary school auditorium watching Emma play a talking tree in an environmental conservation musical, Evelyn felt something shift fundamentally in her chest. This was what mattered, not board meetings or stock prices or corporate dominance. This, a child's proud smile when she spotted friendly faces in the audience. A father's tears of joy at his daughter's 4-line performance. The simple, profound beauty of showing up for the people you loved. After the play, Emma ran to them both, still wearing her tree costume, throwing her arms around Evelyn's substantial belly. "You came! I didn't think you'd really come." "I wouldn't have missed it for anything," Evelyn said, and meant it with startling intensity. "You were wonderful. The best talking tree I've ever seen." Emma beamed. "Did you see when I said my line about protecting the forest? I said it really loud like we practiced." "You were perfect." Evelyn looked at Daniel over Emma's head, seeing her own realization reflected in his eyes. This was family. Imperfect, complicated, built from broken pieces and unexpected circumstances. But real, honest, worth more than any empire she'd ever built. That night, after Emma was asleep and Daniel was preparing to leave for his own apartment, Evelyn stopped him at the door. "Move in," she said. "Permanently. You and Emma. Not as temporary guests, but as family." Daniel stared at her. "Evelyn, I know it's fast. I know we're still figuring things out, but Emma deserves stability. The twins will be here in less than 6 weeks. We're already doing this together. Why keep pretending we're separate when we're building something that works?" She took a shaky breath. "I want you here. Both of you. Not because I need protection or help, but because you make this place feel like home instead of just expensive real estate." Daniel stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. "Are you sure? Really sure? Because once we commit to this, once Emma thinks of this as home, we can't take it back without hurting her." "I'm sure." Evelyn touched his face gently. "I don't know what we are to each other yet. Maybe we'll figure out we're partners in more than parenting. Maybe we'll always just be two people raising kids together. But either way, I want us under one roof. I want Emma to have her own room here. I want to wake up knowing you're both close by. I want—" Her voice broke. "I want to stop being alone." Daniel kissed her then, soft and tentative and full of possibility. It wasn't the desperate kiss of their first night together, born from loneliness and champagne courage. This was different, careful, hopeful. A beginning instead of an ending. When they pulled apart, Daniel smiled against her lips. "Okay, we'll move in. But Evelyn, I'm paying rent. I'm contributing to household expenses. I'm not a kept man and Emma needs to see me pulling my weight. Stubborn. You have no idea." He kissed her again. "But yeah, okay, we'll figure out fair contributions. And I'll finish my engineering degree, and I'll build a career that's mine, not just a job you arranged." "Deal." Evelyn leaned against him, exhausted and hopeful and terrified and happier than she'd been in longer than she could remember. Above them, the city glittered with 1,000 lights. Below them, the world continued its complicated chaos. But here, in this moment, two broken people held each other and believed that maybe, just maybe, they could build something whole. The twins kicked, restless and alive, ready to join the strange, beautiful family waiting to meet them. And for the first time in her carefully controlled life, Evelyn Cross stopped planning the future and simply trusted it would unfold as it needed to. Daniel and Emma moved in on a crisp December Saturday. their belongings fitting into 3 suitcases and a handful of boxes that looked impossibly small in the penthouse's vast entryway. Evelyn watched from the couch where she was confined by doctor's orders, 36 weeks pregnant and feeling like a beached whale, as Emma ran from room to room exclaiming over everything. "This is my room? My actual room forever?" Emma stood in the doorway of the bedroom Evelyn had quietly converted over the past 2 weeks, complete with the dollhouse and new furniture in shades of purple Emma had mentioned loving. "Forever," Evelyn confirmed, her voice catching slightly on the word. "Or at least until you're old enough to want your own apartment, which hopefully isn't for many years." Emma launched herself at Evelyn, hugging her carefully around the belly. "Thank you, thank you, thank you. This is the best room I've ever had." Daniel appeared behind his daughter, his eyes suspiciously bright as he took in the space Evelyn had created. "You didn't have to do all this." "I wanted to." Evelyn ran her fingers through Emma's hair. "She's family. Family deserves to feel at home." That night they ordered pizza and ate it sitting on the living room floor because Emma insisted it was more fun than the formal dining table. Evelyn found herself laughing at the sheer absurdity of it all. A billionaire CEO in $1,000 maternity wear, sitting cross-legged on imported marble, eating pepperoni pizza with a 5-year-old and a man who'd been a janitor 6 months ago. "What's funny?" Daniel asked, reading her expression. "Nothing. Everything." Evelyn wiped pizza grease from her fingers. 6 months ago, I was alone in this penthouse planning a hostile acquisition while drinking wine that costs more than most people's monthly rent. Now I'm eating pizza on the floor, pregnant with twins, living with a man I barely know, and his daughter who's teaching me that happiness doesn't require a business plan. Do you miss it? Daniel's voice was careful. The before? Evelyn thought about it honestly. I miss the certainty. I miss knowing exactly who I was and what I wanted. I miss the simplicity of measuring success in quarterly earnings and market share. She looked at Emma, who was trying to feed pizza to her stuffed rabbit. But I don't miss the emptiness, the loneliness, the feeling that nothing I built actually mattered because there was no one to share it with or leave it to. You're leaving it to the twins now, Daniel pointed out. And Emma, if you want. 3 daughters who'll inherit an empire. I'd rather leave them something more important than an empire. Evelyn's hand rested on her swollen belly. I want to leave them the knowledge that they're loved, that they matter beyond their achievements. That being human is more valuable than being powerful. Emma looked up from her rabbit. Are you going to keep being the boss after the babies come? Yes, but differently. Evelyn smiled at her. I'll work less, be home more, make sure I don't miss important things like school plays and bedtime stories. Good. Emma returned to her pizza, satisfied. Because babies need their mommy around. Daddy says so. After Emma went to bed, Daniel helped Evelyn to her feet, increasingly difficult at 36 weeks with twins, and they stood together at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Are you scared? Daniel asked quietly. About the delivery? Terrified. Evelyn leaned against him, grateful for his solid warmth. Dr. Chen says twins almost always come early. Could be tomorrow, could be 2 more weeks, but either way, it's close. She paused. What if I'm terrible at it? Actually being a mother instead of just preparing to be one? Then you'll learn. Same way I learned with Emma. Daniel's arm came around her shoulders. You mess up, you apologize, you try again. Kids are remarkably forgiving if you're genuinely trying. Emma makes it look easy. Emma had no choice but to be adaptable. Her mother died. Her father was a mess trying to hold it together. Daniel's voice roughened with old pain. She learned early that adults don't have all the answers, that families are built from effort and love, not perfection. I want to be good at this. Evelyn's admission was barely audible. I've been good at everything I've attempted in my professional life. But this feels different, more important, more impossible to control. Because you can't control it. Daniel turned her to face him. You can love them and protect them and show up every day. But you can't control who they become or whether they'll struggle or if they'll make choices you disagree with. Parenting means accepting that your children are separate people who'll disappoint you and amaze you in equal measure. How did you get so wise about this? 5 years of trial and error with Emma, plus my mother, who reminds me constantly that I'm making up half of it as I go. He smiled slightly. But I had one advantage you don't have. What's that? I knew I wanted to be a father. I had 9 months to prepare emotionally. You had about 10 minutes between realizing you were pregnant and having to navigate co-parenting with a stranger. Daniel's hand cupped her face gently. Give yourself credit, Evelyn. You've done something incredibly hard. You've let people in. You've chosen vulnerability over control. You've built a family from nothing but determination and hope. Evelyn kissed him then, long and deep, trying to convey everything she couldn't quite articulate. Gratitude, affection, the terrifying realization that she was falling in love with this man who'd stumbled into her life through desperation and stayed through choice. When they finally pulled apart, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. We're going to be okay. All of us. Even when it's hard. Even when we don't know what we're doing, we'll figure it out together. Promise? Promise. The twins arrived 8 days later, at 3 in the morning on a Tuesday that started with Evelyn's water breaking all over the imported Italian sheets Daniel had been complaining were too expensive to actually sleep on. Daniel. Evelyn shook his shoulder, trying to stay calm despite the panic clawing at her throat. Daniel, wake up. It's time. He jolted awake, immediately alert. Time? Like time? My water broke. Contractions started about 20 minutes ago. We need to go to the hospital. What followed was controlled chaos. Daniel calling his mother to come stay with Emma. Evelyn breathing through increasingly intense contractions while trying to remember everything from the birthing classes she'd insisted they attend. The drive to the hospital through empty pre-dawn streets, Daniel's knuckles white on the steering wheel, Evelyn gripping the door handle and counting seconds between contractions. Dr. Chen met them at the hospital entrance, her presence immediately calming. Right on schedule. 37 weeks with twins is actually perfect timing. Let's get you upstairs and see where we are. The next 6 hours blurred into a haze of pain and medical intervention, and Daniel's hand gripping hers while she screamed through contractions that felt like her body was tearing itself apart. Dr. Chen monitored both babies carefully, her calm competence the only thing keeping Evelyn from complete panic when the contractions came so fast and hard she couldn't catch her breath between them. You're doing great, Daniel kept saying, his voice steady even though his face had gone pale. Just breathe, you've got this. I can't, Evelyn gasped between contractions. It's too much. I can't do this. You can. You are. Daniel pressed a cool cloth to her forehead. You're the strongest person I've ever met. You faced down hostile boards and corporate raiders. 2 tiny babies don't stand a chance against you. Despite the pain, Evelyn laughed weakly. They're currently winning. Only temporarily. Daniel kissed her temple. You've got this. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. At 9:47 in the morning, after one final impossible push that Evelyn was certain would kill her, the first baby arrived. A girl, tiny and red-faced and screaming with impressive lung capacity. She's perfect, Dr. Chen announced, placing the baby on Evelyn's chest. Absolutely perfect. 5 pounds, 3 ounces. Nice strong cry. Evelyn looked down at the impossibly small person against her skin, still connected by the umbilical cord, and felt her entire world realign. This was her daughter, her actual daughter, a person who'd been theoretical for 8 months but was suddenly overwhelmingly real. Hi, Evelyn whispered, tears streaming down her face. Hi, baby. I'm your mom. The infant's eyes opened briefly, dark and unfocused, but seeing, before closing again as she settled against Evelyn's chest. 1 down, Dr. Chen said warmly. Ready for number 2? Evelyn nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging her throat. A nurse took the first baby to clean and weigh her while Evelyn pushed through another series of contractions, these somehow both easier and harder, knowing what to expect. The second baby arrived 12 minutes later, slightly smaller at 4 pounds, 15 ounces, but equally vocal about her displeasure at being evicted from her warm cocoon. Another perfect girl, Doctor, Chen announced, placing the second twin on Evelyn's chest. Well done, Mom. You did beautifully. Daniel stood beside the bed, tears running freely down his face, as he looked at his daughters. They're so small. They're so perfect. Evelyn, look what we made. I know. Evelyn couldn't stop crying, couldn't stop staring at the two tiny faces, couldn't believe that these were hers to protect and love and raise. I can't believe they're really here. The next hours passed in a blur of medical checks and paperwork, and finally, blessedly, being moved to a recovery room where Evelyn could actually rest. Daniel sat in the chair beside her bed, one twin in each arm, looking simultaneously exhausted and more content than she'd ever seen him. "We need names," he said quietly. "We can't just keep calling them Baby A and Baby B." Evelyn looked at her daughters, trying to see who they were beneath the wrinkled newborn features. "What about Sophie?" "For the first one, it means wisdom." Sophie Moore Cross, Daniel tested the name. "I like it." "And for this little one?" He adjusted the second twin in his arms. "Lena, it means light." Evelyn reached out, running one finger along Lena's impossibly soft cheek. "Sophie and Lena are daughters." "Our daughters," Daniel repeated, his voice full of wonder. "We're actually parents to twins. This is insane." "Completely insane." Evelyn felt exhaustion pulling at her, but she fought it off, not wanting to miss a single moment of watching Daniel with their babies. "Thank you for being here, for staying through all of it, for choosing us even when it was hard. Thank you for letting me." Daniel looked up, his eyes meeting hers. 6 months ago, I was invisible. Nobody. Just a guy pushing a cleaning cart through buildings full of important people. Now I'm holding my daughters and living with a woman who's taught me that being seen is worth the risk of being vulnerable. Before Evelyn could respond, there was a soft knock on the door. Daniel's mother appeared, Emma clutching her hand, both of them trying to be quiet in the hospital environment. "Can we meet them?" Emma whispered, her eyes huge with excitement. "Of course." Evelyn gestured them closer. "Come meet your sisters." Emma approached the bed with careful steps, her expression awed as she looked at the tiny babies. "They're so small. Are they supposed to be that small?" "They're perfect." Daniel adjusted Sophie in his arms. "Emma, this is Sophie, and this is Lena, your baby sisters." Emma reached out one tentative finger, stroking Sophie's hand. The baby's fingers curled reflexively around Emma's, and the 5-year-old's face lit up with pure joy. "She's holding my hand! She knows I'm her sister!" Emma looked at Evelyn with such happiness it made Evelyn's chest ache. "Can I hold one, please? I'll be really careful." Daniel looked at Evelyn, who nodded. They settled Emma in the chair with pillows supporting her arms, then carefully placed Lena in her lap. Emma sat perfectly still, barely breathing, her entire focus on the baby in her arms. "Hi, Lena," Emma whispered. "I'm Emma. I'm your big sister. I'm going to teach you everything, how to tie your shoes and read books and all the best playground games. And I'm going to protect you from mean kids and help you with homework and share my stuffed animals when you're scared." She looked up at Daniel and Evelyn. "I love her. I love them both so much already." Evelyn felt fresh tears spill over. This was family, not the cold transactional relationships she'd known in the corporate world, not the empty achievements that had filled her 40 years. This, messy and complicated and built from broken pieces, this was what actually mattered. Daniel's mother came to stand beside Evelyn, her hand resting gently on Evelyn's shoulder. "You did good, sweetheart. Both of you. These babies are blessed to have you." The words, simple and genuine, broke something open in Evelyn's chest. She'd never had a mother figure in her adult life. Her own mother had died when Evelyn was 20, and she'd spent the subsequent years building walls to protect herself from needing anyone. But here was Daniel's mother accepting her without judgment, welcoming her into a family Evelyn had done nothing to deserve. "Thank you," Evelyn managed, "for everything. For raising Daniel to be the kind of man who stays. For loving Emma so well. For accepting me even though I've turned your son's life upside down." "You gave him back his life," Daniel's mother said firmly. "Before you, he was surviving. Working himself to death, raising Emma alone, never thinking about his own happiness. Now he's living, building a future. That's a gift, not a burden." Over the next 3 days in the hospital, a routine began to emerge. Daniel stayed with Evelyn and the twins, sleeping in the uncomfortable chair, helping with feedings and diaper changes, learning the subtle differences between Sophie's cry and Lena's. Emma visited every afternoon after school, doing homework in the corner while chattering to her sisters about everything from multiplication tables to the drama in her kindergarten class. Dr. Chen visited daily, pronouncing both babies healthy and thriving despite their small size. "You can take them home tomorrow," she announced on day 3. "They're feeding well, maintaining body temperature, and showing no signs of complications. You've got 2 very healthy little girls." "I'm terrified," Evelyn admitted. "In the hospital, there are nurses and monitors and people who know what they're doing. At home, it's just us. Just you and Daniel and Emma and your mother-in-law and probably a dozen other people who'll show up to help," Dr. Chen corrected with a smile. "You're not alone in this, Evelyn. Let people help you. That's what family does." The first night home was chaos. Sophie cried from 8 until midnight, refusing all comfort. Lena refused to latch properly, turning nursing into a frustrating battle. Emma had a nightmare and wandered into the master bedroom at 2 in the morning, tearfully asking if the babies were okay because they were crying so much. By 3 in the morning, Evelyn sat on the floor of the nursery, both twins finally sleeping in their bassinets, Emma curled up beside her, and Daniel slumped against the wall looking like he'd been through a war. "This is impossible," Evelyn said flatly. "How do people do this? How did you do this alone with Emma?" "Barely," Daniel admitted. "I cried a lot, called my mother constantly, survived on 4 hours of sleep and coffee and sheer desperation." He reached over, taking her hand. "But we're not alone. We have each other. We have help. And eventually they'll sleep longer than 45 minutes at a stretch." "When?" "I have no idea." Daniel laughed weakly. "But I'm told it happens eventually. Maybe by the time they're teenagers." Despite her exhaustion, Evelyn smiled. "We're really doing this. Actually raising 3 children together, building a family from absolute chaos." "Best kind of family," Daniel said. "The ones you choose. The ones you fight for. The ones that don't fit any conventional template, but work anyway because everyone's committed to making it work." Emma stirred against Evelyn's side. "Are we a forever family now?" she asked sleepily. "Like, really forever?" Evelyn looked at Daniel, seeing her own emotions reflected in his eyes. Then she pulled Emma closer, her other hand still linked with Daniel's, their daughters sleeping peacefully nearby. "Yes," Evelyn said clearly. "We're a forever family. Really forever." The weeks that followed were impossibly hard. Evelyn had never experienced exhaustion like this. The bone-deep fatigue of waking every 2 hours to feed crying infants, of living in a constant state of vigilance, of having zero control over her schedule or environment. The corporate world she'd dominated for decades seemed laughably simple compared to the tyranny of twin newborns who refused to sleep simultaneously. But there were moments. Perfect, crystalline moments that made the exhaustion worth it. Sophie's first smile at 3 weeks old, directed at Daniel while he changed her diaper and sang off-key lullabies. Lena falling asleep on Evelyn's chest, her tiny hand curled around Evelyn's finger with absolute trust. Emma reading picture books to her sisters with dramatic flair, insisting they needed early literacy exposure. Daniel's mother showing up unannounced with meals and offering to watch the babies so Evelyn could shower in peace, and Daniel himself present and steady. Through every crisis, learning alongside Evelyn, making mistakes, and apologizing and trying again. They functioned as a team without thinking about it, communicating in half-sentences and meaningful looks, dividing responsibilities based on whoever was less exhausted in any given moment. 3 months after the twins were born, Evelyn returned to work part-time. Sarah Chen had managed brilliantly in her absence, and the board, chastened by Evelyn's successful navigation of pregnancy and early motherhood, made no moves toward another coup. But Evelyn found she didn't care about corporate dominance the way she once had. She left the office at 4 every day to be home for dinner. She declined evening events and weekend conferences. She turned down a lucrative acquisition opportunity because the negotiation timeline would have required international travel during Sophie and Lena's first year. "You're different," Richard Thornton observed at a board meeting 6 months post-twins. His tone wasn't quite hostile, more bewildered. Less Ruthless. No, Evelyn corrected, just more selective about what's worth being ruthless about. My daughter's childhoods are worth protecting ruthlessly. Everything else is negotiable. At home, life settled into a new normal. Emma thrived as a big sister, helping with feedings and entertaining the twins with silly faces and songs. The babies grew, developing personalities that delighted and exhausted everyone in equal measure. Sophie was intense and demanding, refusing to accept anything less than immediate attention. Lena was quieter but stubborn, content to observe until she decided she wanted something, at which point she'd scream until her needs were met. Daniel finished his engineering degree and accepted a position at a firm specializing in sustainable infrastructure, work that paid well and aligned with his values. He insisted on contributing equally to household expenses, despite Evelyn's net worth making his salary almost irrelevant by comparison. It's not about the money, he explained when she questioned why it mattered. It's about teaching our daughters that relationships work when both people contribute. That love isn't about one person supporting the other, but about building something together. One evening, when the twins were 9 months old and Emma was at a friend's house for a sleepover, Daniel and Evelyn found themselves alone in the living room for the first time in months. The babies slept peacefully in their cribs, the baby monitor quiet, the penthouse wrapped in rare silence. "I love you," Evelyn said, the words surprising her as they emerged. She'd been thinking it for months but hadn't quite dared to say it out loud. Daniel looked up from his laptop where he'd been reviewing engineering specifications. "What?" "I love you." Evelyn set down her tablet, meeting his eyes directly. "Not just as the father of my children, or as my co-parent, or as the person who helps manage household chaos. I love you. The person you are. The values you hold. The way you show up for our family every single day without fanfare or expectation of praise. The way you see me, really see me, underneath all the armor I spent 40 years building." Daniel crossed to where she sat on the couch, kneeling in front of her so they were eye level. "I love you too. I've loved you since about 3 months in, when you were on bed rest and miserable and terrified, and I watched you give up everything you'd built to protect 2 lives you'd never met. I fell in love with your courage, your vulnerability, your desperate determination to be a good mother even though you had no template for what that looked like. I was a terrible CEO during that time," Evelyn said wryly. "Completely absent, totally checked out from corporate concerns. You were exactly the mother our daughters needed. That was more important than any board meeting or acquisition." Daniel took her hands in his. "And you've proven what I've always believed, that you can be brilliant and successful and also human and present. That power doesn't require sacrificing every relationship on the altar of achievement. I couldn't have done it without you." Evelyn's throat was tight. "I would have tried to maintain complete control and probably put myself back in the hospital. You taught me to trust, to delegate, to accept help, to be part of a team instead of always leading it. You taught me that I was worth more than survival wages and invisible work, that my daughter deserved better than a father too exhausted to do more than keep her fed and sheltered, that aiming higher wasn't selfish, it was modeling ambition and self-worth." Daniel smiled. "We've been pretty good for each other." "So what now?" Evelyn asked quietly. "We love each other. We're raising 3 children together. We've built this complicated, messy, beautiful family. What comes next?" Daniel reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box that made Evelyn's breath catch. "Next, if you're willing, we make it official. Not because we need a piece of paper to validate what we've built, but because I want the whole world to know that I choose you. Every day. Forever." He opened the box, revealing a ring that was simple and elegant, a single diamond that caught the light without ostentation. "Evelyn Cross, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life being your partner in this beautiful chaos we've created?" Evelyn felt tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling wider than she could ever remember. "Yes, absolutely yes. I choose you too, every complicated, exhausting, wonderful day of this." Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger, then kissed her with a tenderness that held all the love they'd been building through months of sleepless nights and shared responsibilities and learning to be a family. When they finally pulled apart, The baby monitor crackled to life with Sophie's distinctive cry, followed immediately by Lena's. Both started laughing, the romantic moment dissolving into the reality of twin babies who needed feeding. "I'll get Sophie, you get Lena," Daniel suggested. "Deal." Evelyn stood, looking down at the ring on her finger, then at the man she was going to marry. "I love our life. I love this chaos. I love that we built something real from two broken people in unexpected circumstances." "Me too." Daniel kissed her once more. "Now let's go feed our daughters before they wake Emma 3 houses over with that crying." They married 3 months later in a small ceremony at the penthouse, with only close family and friends present. Emma served as flower girl, taking her responsibility with utmost seriousness. Sophie and Lena, now 1-year-old and walking unsteadily, were supposed to be ring bearers, but instead spent the ceremony toddling around and charming every guest with their chaotic energy. Evelyn wore a simple cream dress, no designer gown or corporate power suit, just elegant simplicity. Daniel wore a suit he'd bought specifically for the occasion, refusing Evelyn's offer to hire a tailor because he wanted to contribute financially to their wedding. When the officiant asked if they had vows, Daniel went first. "Evelyn, you've taught me that being seen is worth the vulnerability it requires. That building something beautiful often means accepting help instead of doing everything alone. That love grows not from grand gestures, but from showing up every day and choosing each other in the small moments." His voice roughened with emotion. "I promise to keep seeing you, all of you. The brilliant CEO and the exhausted mother and the woman who's still learning to let people in. I promise to build this life with you, raising our daughters to be strong and kind and brave enough to be vulnerable. I promise forever, in sickness and health, in chaos and calm, until the day I die." Evelyn could barely see through her tears as she responded. "Daniel, you've taught me that power means nothing without people to share it with. That control is an illusion, but trust is real. That the best things in life are the ones we don't plan, the ones that terrify us into growth." She took a shaky breath. "I promise to keep trusting you, to keep choosing vulnerability over armor, to keep building this family we've created from broken pieces and unexpected grace. I promise to love you and Emma and Sophie and Lena with everything I have for all my days, without reservation or retreat." The officiant pronounced them married, and Daniel kissed her while their daughters clapped and Emma cheered, and everyone who mattered most in their world celebrated the family they'd become. That night, after the guests had left and the girls were asleep, and Daniel had carried an exhausted Emma to bed, Evelyn stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city that had witnessed her entire journey. From lonely CEO to pregnant and terrified. From corporate dominance to learning to share control. From ice queen to woman who loved so fiercely it sometimes scared her. Daniel came to stand beside her, his arm around her waist, both of them reflected in the glass against the glittering city lights. "No regrets?" he asked quietly. "Not a single one." Evelyn leaned into him. "6 months ago, if you'd told me I'd be married to a man I met as a janitor, raising 3 daughters, and actually happy about working part-time so I could be present for my family, I would have thought you were insane. And now? Now I know that the best things in life are the ones that don't fit the plan, the ones that scare you into becoming someone better than you were." She turned to face him fully. "I built an empire, Daniel. I dominated boardrooms and crushed competitors and accumulated wealth most people can't imagine. But none of it meant anything until I had people to share it with, until I had a family that loved me for being human instead of powerful." "The empire still matters," Daniel pointed out. "You're still CEO, still building and creating and leading. Yes, but differently now, with perspective, with boundaries. With the understanding that my daughters will remember me being at their school plays and bedtime stories, not the acquisitions I closed or the stock prices I drove up." Evelyn smiled. "That's your influence, teaching me that success means something different than I thought it did. You taught me too." Daniel's hand cupped her face gently. "That aiming higher isn't betraying your roots, that wanting more education, better career, financial stability, doesn't make me a sellout or a climber. That I could build something meaningful professionally while also being a present father." They stood together in the silence, Two people who'd stumbled into each other's lives through desperation and stayed through choice. The city glittered below them, full of people chasing their own versions of success and happiness and meaning. But here, 40 floors above the noise and chaos, Evelyn and Daniel had found something worth more than any empire. In the nursery down the hall, Sophie and Lena slept in matching cribs, their tiny chests rising and falling with perfect synchronicity. In her bedroom, Emma dreamed of being the best big sister in the world. And in the master bedroom, evidence of their life together scattered across every surface: baby toys and engineering textbooks, corporate reports and children's picture books, expensive art and Emma's crayon drawings taped to the walls. It was messy and imperfect and completely contrary to the controlled, curated life Evelyn had carefully constructed for 40 years. It was also the most beautiful thing she'd ever built. "Come on," Daniel said, tugging her away from the window. "We should sleep while the girls are actually sleeping. Statistically, we have maybe 4 more hours before someone wakes up crying." "Ever the optimist?" Evelyn teased, but she followed him to bed, curling against his warmth, her ring catching the light from the city beyond their windows. As sleep pulled at her, Evelyn thought about the woman she'd been that night in the empty ballroom, drunk and desperate and so completely alone she'd reached for connection with a stranger just to feel human for a moment. That woman had been drowning in power and success and profound emptiness. The woman she was now had less control, less certainty, less time for corporate dominance. But she had Daniel's steady presence, Emma's uncomplicated affection, Sophie and Lena's absolute trust. She had a family built from impossible circumstances and sustained by daily choice. She had love, real, complicated, messy love that required vulnerability and trust and constant effort. And it was worth more than any empire she'd ever built. Daniel's breathing steadied into sleep beside her. Down the hall, one of the twins made a small sound before settling back into silence. The city hummed beyond their walls, full of ambition and desperation, and people searching for meaning and success and achievement and accumulation. But here, in this moment, Evelyn Cross, CEO, mother, wife, daughter, of privilege who'd finally learned that power meant nothing without people to share it with, was exactly where she needed to be. She closed her eyes and let sleep take her, content in the knowledge that tomorrow would bring chaos and challenges and probably very little sleep. But it would also bring Emma's laughter and the twins' first words and Daniel's steady presence and the 1,000 small moments that made a life worth living. The night everything broke had led her here, to family, to love, to understanding that some things couldn't be planned or controlled, only accepted with grateful open hands. And for the first time in 40 years, Evelyn Cross was completely, perfectly at peace.